Welcome everybody to the East Hampton Town Planning Board, January 11th, 2017. This is our first meeting, and I wish everyone a Happy New Year. And I want to particularly thank Reed Jones for his 7 years of service on this board. And also to welcome Randy Parsons, who is our newest member, who will be the Springs representative. Thank you. So we're going to try to get a few things in between now and 7 o'clock. And let's start with Boswick's. Joanne?
The department wrote a memorandum after receiving one from the town attorney, so I'll start with his memorandum from John Nicky dated September 7th. I've reviewed the covenants and restrictions. I note that paragraph 1F of such covenants provides that no expansion of the limited use of the premises shall be allowed upon the premises or any portion thereof. As the applicant seeks to provide for the installation of a 400 square foot shed, 2 ice machines, and a walk-in cooler, these items would appear to violate the limitations set forth in the covenants and restrictions, which were filed as a condition of the special permit previously granted, as they constitute an expansion of the limited use of the premises. Well, the CNRs also provide for the termination of the special permit, and the CNRs in the event of a transfer of the premises to a different owner, it has previously been determined that such a restriction is unenforceable and contrary to established case law. Therefore, the CNR shall be considered to remain in full force and effect, and the proposed expansion is prohibited as a result of the same. The planning department wrote a memorandum that says the subject application is for construction of a 400 square foot shed and the relocation of a walk-in freezer installed without approvals into the shed. 2 ice machines, a brick patio, and a patio roof overhang have also been installed without approvals. A 1987 site plan application for approval of an on-site food preparation facility and retail store on this site was highly controversial at the time, with neighbors finding that the use was inappropriate in a limited business overlay district. As mitigation, the planning board required that a number of covenants and restrictions be filed to limit the potential impacts of this use. A copy of the CNRs filed on December 5th, 1987 is contained in the board's files. And by memorandum dated September 7th, the assistant town attorney determined that the CNRs filed on the property prohibit the installation of the improvements under review of the subject application. A copy of a planning department memorandum dated October 17th, 2008, requesting a determination from the chief building inspector regarding a prior site plan application to construct a shed and walk-in cooler, and of a memorandum from the chief building inspector advising that the proposal represented a substantial expansion are attached. Based on this information, it appears that the planning board does not have the ability to review or approve the subject application.
Now, I could add something. Since I wrote that memo, the applicant has actually provided me with some copies of some determinations from the building inspector where similar types of items have actually been considered not to be an expansion of the use. So it seems like we have opinions going both ways in the past. So I think the most appropriate solution would be to have the current building inspector review the proposal and the covenants and make a determination as to, well, actually, they really don't even have to review the covenants. They just need to review the proposal and make a determination as to whether adding the additional items that are requested would be deemed to expand the use of the premises, non-conforming use. It could very well be that they may view this as just something that facilitates the use but doesn't expand it. So I think we need to hear from the building inspector. So to the extent that I think you should do that. I just wanted to make the board aware of that because I wasn't aware of some of the conflicting interpretations until the applicant provided them. So with opinions on both sides of the fence, I think we should get some clarification from the building inspector.
Will you write that opinion?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
The request to the building inspector?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's just see if there's anyone for the applicant. Yeah.
Hi, Madeline Van John here for the applicant. I think John pretty much just summed up what happened there. It seems like there was some sort of cross. We submitted something in November, but we hadn't yet received his memo from September. So once we looked it over, I think that we're happy going forward, getting a building inspector determination.
Okay. This is yours, Patty, right?
Yes, it is. I think everything's been said. I think I was going to defer to legal, and now legal's deferring to the building department. So I'm out of it. We can't make any determinations at this point until we hear back from the building inspector.
Okay, Randy?
Sounds what John said.
Okay.
That's safe.
Ian?
I agree.
Okay. Kathy?
Just for my edification, is it typical for the covenants and restrictions to be overridden by building inspector determination? Is that how this works?
We're not talking about overriding them, we're talking about whether the proposal fits within that exclusion.
Okay.
So, yeah, they wouldn't be overriding them.
So it's really defining it?
Yes.
To see if it fits in with the covenants and restrictions?
Whether just
Okay.
adding these units to the property actually is an expansion of the use, or the use maybe hasn't expanded and these are something else. Because there
understand.
are opinions on both.
Yeah, it was
Right.
just a protocol thing.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
inquiring about.
Right,
Thank
so
you.
just figuring out if what that freezer
Right.
really expands the use, they're not adding chairs or more space for retail. So that's what the
Exactly.
building inspector is going to determine, or whoever does that, okay.
Correct, and if he agrees that that's the case, that it doesn't expand the use, we can go ahead and process the application further.
Okay.
Okay, and I agree with Rob.
Okay, so I'll write that request to the
Yep.
building, okay,
That would be great.
all right, I'll do that tomorrow.
Okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Singular Wireless at the recycling center.
A public hearing was held on December 7th. No members of the public spoke, and no letters were submitted to the file. The Planning Department has prepared an EAF Part 2 and 3. A negative declaration pursuant to Secret and Chapter 128 of the Town Code is recommended. The application will need to be referred to the Suffolk County Planning Commission, and once that's done, the board can determine whether or not they're going to approve the application. But basically, the board's duty tonight is to make a secret determination.
Kathy?
I think that we've vetted this very thoroughly. I thank Eric for his complete assessment of the environmental impacts. There was one, just for the public's benefit, there was one area that was deemed to have a large impact, and now I can't find my highlighted. Well, anyway, it was about the visual impacts, because this will be a 199-foot pole, which is taller than what's existing. But I think this is ready to go. I have mixed feelings about the height, but it is an opportunity site. We need to improve the service, and I think we should proceed. I'd like to move to make a negative declaration.
Second.
Discussion? Anybody? Yeah, anybody who wants to kick in on discussion at this point? Randy?
Can I bring up the?
Whatever you
Yep.
think, yeah.
I wanted to see if the applicant feels that there might be room for emergency service antennas on this tower. For example, from a local fire ambulance department.
Good evening, John Huber, attorney for the applicant, and welcome to the board. It's a
Thank you.
pleasure to appear before you. I think we have some options. We may, so long as there are no frequency conflicts, and I don't expect that they are, because there's a disparity in the frequencies that are licensed to the wireless carriers. There may be room for whip antennas up at the top, but under a worst-case scenario, the existing monopole that is at the highway yard adjacent would have ample room for any first responder type infrastructure that you would need, at least in the interim, if that was decided to be taken down after Sprint and T-Mobile, if and when they vacate from that. That's certainly the town's, within the flexibility that's afforded to the town at that time.
So you're saying there could be some technical interference between the different types of antenna?
I don't believe that there would be interference. for the simple reason, and I have a tremendous amount of confidence on this, that the FCC licenses each of these frequencies. The frequencies that would be used by police, fire, sanitation, highway department are so far apart from the frequencies that are licensed to the wireless carriers that from a technology standpoint, there would not be interference.
And Eric, you thought that the types of antennas that are typically used by fire ambulance would be the type that could be, if we...
Yeah, I mean, the weight of them is generally a lot lower than the cell equipment, so the structural analysis that was submitted for this didn't include equipment for emergency services, but I don't really anticipate that it would be difficult to get emergency services equipment on the new tower. I don't know if you agree.
I do agree. One of the nice things, too, is that this proposed pole, 'cause there is a distinction between a tower, what's out here in the back is a tower. We're proposing a stealth monopole. Everything's concealed within, is being designed structurally specifically for this application. So, and it's being built in accordance with the most modern standards, structural standards. So I have no doubt that structurally it can handle the loading, and I also think that from a technology standpoint, there would not be interference. It's just a matter of where on that structure and we will refer to those as whip antennas, because visually that's what they look like. They're long, slender, narrow. I imagine those are the types of antennas. The only issue is we have to make sure that they're separated a certain distance from the antennas that are enclosed within the pole.
Okay, just to wrap that up, John, I know this is a town-owned property.
Yes.
And do you think that the town board needs to be in the loop on keeping the potential for these emergency services on that tower?
I think we could certainly, bring their attention to it. They've been involved in this project, though. I've had meetings with the applicant, and they understand the concept here, and actually agree that if we can get this built with the antennas not being as highly visible as they are now, and accommodating all the other carriers eventually, that it would be a good thing to have placed there. The other tower, eventually, the hope is that we get the other carriers off the existing tower and it comes down at some point. So this is the only tower that we see, and hopefully we see it less than what we see now.
All right, thanks. So we're actually need to take a vote on a negative declaration. We've had a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous? Okay. So we've a unanimous vote on a negative declaration. And let's see what we're doing on time. Let's try to jump.
20 minutes.
Let's try to jump into Dittmer. And Joanne, we're also just seeing the memo in print, at least, from Tom Talmadge, the town engineer. So we want to make sure we talk about that.
Okay, this is a proposal, subdivide 1.9 acres of land that's located in a resident zoning district. It's also in the water recharge overlay district, a town designated groundwater protection area, the Suffolk County South Fork Special Groundwater Protection Area, and Pine Barrens, two Suffolk County designated groundwater protection areas. It contains rolling knob and kettle topography typical of a glacial moraine. The aerial, the surrounding area is, the immediate area is zoned A. They're all relatively small half-acre urban renewal lots. When you get beyond a couple of streets, you start getting into A2 and A3 zoning based on the fact that it's in a groundwater protection area. This aerial's in front of it. So when we first reviewed it, we noted that the two lots lacked the minimum lot area width, and they would require 40-foot wide variances because they're, because the lots are 120 feet in width where they're required to be 160. We noted that if they subdivided the lot in a eastern, north-southerly direction, you could get the lot width, but we realized that there were a lot of steep slopes and we wanted the topography shown. So they came in with a map that showed topography, 2-foot topographic contours, and we identified the steep slopes in 20% and greater in red and the 15 to 20 in orange. And they came back with a map that accommodated with the building envelopes. They showed building envelopes on it that really included some of those slopes, and your code requires that they not be included as buildable areas. So in November, they sent a surveyor back out, and the surveyor did specific topographic contours according to the survey. There we go. That has a slightly different topographic pattern. And they're indicating 2 building envelopes, and they're showing that it's really not feasible to divide the property in the other way to avoid the variances. So there are 2 building envelopes proposed that exclude the slopes. On further review, we've determined that there's a large stand of mountain laurel in the corner of this, in the corner here. That's a New York State protected plant species. So we're recommending that at the minimum that the building envelope here be pulled back a little bit to slightly to accommodate more of those, or protect more of those mountain laurel. So there's a question of access right along the road. You can't access a lot from Stephen Hans Path. From Park Street, the red is 20% and greater slopes, the 15 to 20%. So the town engineer is recommending a common driveway. At the minimum, I think you would at least want to have the applicant identify where the access to the 2 lots would be. So if the board finds that this is the only feasible layout for a subdivision for the property into 2 lots, then they're actually ready to proceed with a variance application. We usually hold back on, in case the board, if there are alternative layouts proposed, it may change the extent or the number of variances, but this seems to be the only feasible layout, and so I think the applicant's probably going to want to proceed now to seek lot width variances, and you should decide what comments you're going to send to the zoning board when you discuss this.
Okay. Ian, this is yours, I think.
Yeah, a quick question for you, Joanne. It looks like on the building envelope, they are still included an area of steep slopes?
I think they wrap around it, right?
No, it wraps around.
Yeah.
The red color is the 20% that they have to exclude.
Right,
The orange
that's
is
that.
Okay, it wraps around,
Yeah, goes
I can
around,
see that.
yeah.
Okay,
the 15 to 20% just gives you a better idea of the topography and where the hills are and where the features are that
Yep.
you want to avoid.
from here it's hard to see what the line goes around. Okay, I think there's one other item too, which is the engineer's comments, and I guess I would defer maybe to legal counsel. He's suggesting that there's an additional assessment on this property. I just saw this for the first time tonight.
No,
That relates to the fact that what had happened, and this property is located in an area where the town just is in the process of completing its first road improvement zone in the urban renewal maps. So these are all being improved to town standards, and they'll be taken into the town highway system. And the cost of the improvements is divided among the buildable lots. So what he's suggesting here, since there's a creation of an additional buildable lot, that each one of the lots would in turn, because right now it just has one assessment as one lot, becomes 2 lots, there should be an assessment for each lot, and what that will do is bring everybody else's costs down a little bit, so everybody shares equally in the cost of the road improvements, and that's what he's referring to there.
And is that typical? I've never seen that
Yeah.
type of situation
Yeah,
where there's a
I mean,
new
just-
subdivision on
Right.
such a case, but.
Because there's, the improvements are just being finished now, so actually they haven't even been or if they've been charged at all to the property owners, it's a very small amount. The full cost of the road improvements will start to be billed to the property owners next year.
I believe this is the first urban renewal map area that has had a road improvement district. It may be the first of many, but we don't have many road improvement districts in town. That's why you don't usually look at that issue.
That makes sense. Since it's the first time I'm seeing that, that recommendation from the engineer, I'd welcome comments from the applicant if they see things differently, but on the face of it, that seems to make sense. Otherwise, I think that obviously access has to be shown to these lots. The last time this was before us, I think we encouraged to see a different layout where a lot width variance wouldn't be necessary. I get looking at the topography, and I've been to the site, why this perhaps is a better layout. I will say that I'm reluctant to send comments to the zoning board recommending for a variance, particularly in the case where we're creating new lots, because in some cases presumably there's a lot that's not appropriate, even though you have the area to subdivide. And so I'm not against the layout in this case. I wouldn't send comments discouraging the zoning board from granting that variance, but I would just say that we've looked at it, and they should use their own standards as to whether they think a variance should be granted.
Sorry,
I know that that's vague, and Joanne, maybe
The zoning board usually looks to you for recommendations when it comes to subdivisions, so they want your recommendations.
I have a question, and maybe this will help.
Mhm.
Is it typical for the planning board to take an urban renewal lot and create two out of one? Is that a typical?
We don't have many that are subdividable, but you have had other ones. Whistle Lane was another one.
Right.
Where we did that.
Right.
It was one.
Right, okay,
But these are like 1 acre lots, right?
Yes.
yeah.
All right, so,
I hate to be vague. Oh, sorry, Joe.
no, it's your thing.
I hate to be vague. What I'm saying is I don't have a problem with this layout. I think if this lot is to be subdivided, this layout makes sense. And I think that maybe we'd say that to the zoning board. But I want to be very careful in saying that I think that means, I'm not on the ZBA. Their standards are different than ours. And so if this doesn't meet their standards, for whatever reason, I don't want them to think that we're saying this should happen from a planning standpoint. If a subdivision takes place here, I think this layout makes more sense than the other one that we recommended they look at. But I want to be careful from giving a strong recommendation, if that makes sense. And I know the ZBA, I know everybody doesn't like that sort of vagary, but I want to make sure we're doing our job and letting them do theirs. So I would welcome other comments and go around the table.
Yeah, let's go around. Kathy?
Well, I understand your,
In fact, you know what, Kathy, why don't
Yes.
we just make sure, Ian, if you want to hit these other points, the clearing and the grading.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Building
glossed over that.
Yeah.
We recommending that because of all the topography in the mountain, the protected plant species, that if this goes forward, that all the clearing and grading be confined to the building envelopes. And
I agree with that.
okay.
Okay, and let me just see, and the common driveway, do you have, you for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, I'm just making a
And
list.
I'm open to other suggestions, but access has to be shown, and I think a common driveway makes sense in this case.
Okay, all right, Kathy, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
that's okay. I think that this property is just very constrained. The slopes are, part of the reason it's one lot, my take on this is the reason it's been one lot is because it's too hard to split it into two, kind of no matter how you look at it, because of the slopes. And given its groundwater protection sensitivity, I'm reluctant to add a unit of density in an area that, is one right now. That's one of my concerns. Neither of the lots meet zoning. It's increasing the density. I don't know. I think we're trying to put a round peg in a square hole here. So I guess if there's, access needs to be shown. There's just no easy access point that I can see on this map, given the slopes. The project, to protect the mountain laurel, and the need to contain, if we were to approve both these building envelopes, the need to contain the clearing that's sort of in the middle of the lot just seems really challenging to me. I was once married to a builder, so I know how these things work, and it's not an easy thing to do. So I would like to see another pass at this. I'd have to see how access was going to happen before I could really make my recommendation, because it just seems like a really constrained lot to me. It just doesn't seem like we can make two out of one here. That's my basic bent.
Okay, Diana?
Okay, I think this is better than when we had it the other way. This is a much better configuration, because you do have more buildable area. There are a lot of constrained lots there. I agree that we shouldn't clear beyond where the building envelope is, and I don't think it's our concern whether they can build in there or not. That's going to be the owner's concern if they build it. I don't have a problem sending comments to the zoning board. This is in an A zone. Joanne?
Yes.
It is in an A zone, so
Yes.
this is really, if the topography allowed, it'd be subdivided into 4 lots.
No, 2 lots.
2-acre lot.
It's a 1.9 acre lot,
You
and
say it's an A zone, which
A
is a
zone,
half-acre
so
zone.
40,000 square feet minimum lot area, so you get two.
Oh,
two
A1,
is the mi-
okay.
minimum.
B is the,
Is two, yeah, right.
sorry about that,
Yeah.
misspoke. But I don't have a problem if the side variances are not that huge. I mean, what the zoning board does, they don't have standard. The standard is the town code. And what they will do is give relief to the town code for any setbacks. So I don't have a problem with this,
Okay.
as long as they,
The,
Lot width.
it's lot width that they're not.
right.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, so, but that's gonna create a side to the people on both sides, right? That's what you're getting relief from. So, you know, I'd leave that relief to the zoning board, but I don't have a problem with this configuration.
Patty?
I have some concerns of it becoming 2 lots, strictly because I was working off a previous topography that you had up there a few minutes ago, and that really looked very confined, so I'm not sure, which I should be looking at. I mean, the other one just seemed like it was just very confined, and I didn't know how that was really going to work out for 2 separate lots.
Well, this is what we should look at, right?
Yeah, this is
current
the-
topography?
Yeah.
This is what according to the map, this represents site-specific topography.
Well, let me ask, we have consensus of the 2 maps? This is the better one,
I think so,
Yes.
the other one.
right?
Yes.
I think.
Okay.
Okay, so think about this map, I think.
Then given this map, I guess as long as there's some sort of entrance, common driveway, wherever that might be, then we'd send it on to zoning.
Okay, Randy?
Couple of questions. Slopes exceeding 20% are not excluded from lot area.
They are,
They are.
they are.
So in.
No, I'm sorry, they're not excluded from lot area, no,
Okay,
no. They're excluded from the building envelopes.
okay. All right, well then, one of my questions is, where is the low point? I'm just thinking from a drainage perspective. On your old map, it almost looked like a kettle hole, so is there a,
The low point is the middle. So everything here goes to the middle. This is a large, this looks like the side of a mountain when you're out there, but according to this, it's not, the slopes are not 15%, but this all drains this way, and this drains this way.
Does-
And this a little bit that way, so the center is really the low
so
point.
it's not really where you would expect the stormwater to collect, it's not in the building envelopes? Or,
It looks
I haven't done, the engineer hasn't done that analysis.
so like in Montauk, we could create 2 lots here, and then they'll have their basements full of water. The other question I had is access off of Park Street, is that where the common driveway would come in?
The access, I think that's the only place they could take access. There's a scenic easement here, There's some sharp turns and very steep slopes, so the only choice would be to take it off Park Street.
And then if you came off Park Street and you wanted to avoid the 15 and 20% slopes, it'd be that little white corner there, which would require an access easement over that one lot to get to the other one. But if that's the best place, I wonder if it would make sense to have an access easement over that lot, or
Common driveway easement, and you want to have it depicted on the map then, at this point, so you could see where it would go? If we
again, I guess
propose-
we're
That would be helpful.
chicken and egg.
Yeah.
And I did wonder, Joanne, if I see there's a 50-foot easement on Stephen Hance Path, which we all know is a well-traveled road. I'm wondering if they would move that easement back to take in those 20% slopes.
Expand the easement.
Yeah. You could pick up really all of those steep slopes.
And the mountain laurel in this area.
Yeah, maybe the
That's a good
mountain.
suggestion.
I would feel better about 2 lots there if we had some of that mitigation.
Okay. Lori, do you want to come up?
Thanks.
Okay, so, welcome to the board, Randy. Funny to be on opposite sides of the playing field again. We all seem to be on the same page, I'll tell you right now. We've marked up this map. We clearly recognize that the 20% slopes in this area are absolutely useless to us, and we would extend the scenic easement to be about 120 feet here, 180 feet here, and to include the mountain laurel here. We would continue to have this building envelope be square for the purposes of a reasonable sized lot, but you'd have your scenic easement to protect your mountain laurel in this corner. A reasonable, not size, what is the word I mean?
Shape.
Shape, thank you. And then we found several options for access. We have the ability to do a common driveway through here. We have the ability to access this lot through here and do an access easement through here. We'd like to, the word would be postpone the decision about access until after the zoning board has made their decision and get down to the nitty-gritty once the zoning board variances have been granted. I mean, we have access options. There's not a problem here with that. So I wanted to tell you that this is 4 tax lots presently and being combined into 2 tax lots to be developed. Some of those lots were much smaller. The lot width, in terms of variances, is very compatible with the neighborhood. There are lots that are as small in width as 40 feet. Most of them are 100 to 120, and these are 120. Our client is very happy to protect the mountain laurel. He, in fact, plants that on his sites that he develops. He uses Long Island East Hampton native plants through a company named Country Gardens. As I said, we're going to extend the scenic easement. The one thing that we do need to recognize is that clearing for access would be outside of the building envelope. And that would have to be, there's no other way to do it. You have to get to the lot, and we can't have the building envelope in the setbacks.
And that's actually what we recommended.
Okay, great, good. So, that's our comments, but I think we kind of thought through your memorandum, and I think we have we're agreement with what you're recommending.
Lori, you said there are 4 tax lots, but my understanding is on the urban renewal map, this is shown as one building lot now?
It's actually very confusing. It's shown as a park, which,
The town recognizes.
Recognizes one building lot, so, right, okay, just to be clear, we're not reducing density. We're increasing density. Okay, that's very helpful, thank you. So let's quickly go through these questions, and then we'll see where we are. We have consensus that this layout is the better of the, if it's
Yes.
going to happen, that's the better one. We agree that the mountain laurel should be excluded from the building envelope?
Yes.
Yes. Or protected by scenic easement.
Well,
Right.
I'm just going,
Okay.
these are the
Okay.
questions they
Oh,
give us.
sorry.
You guys give us. Yeah, all right.
If you agree with what Lori said, it's different.
Within scenic easement,
Yes.
yes.
As
okay,
as
good,
long as the
thank you,
planning
Randy.
department agrees that that's a valid way
Yeah,
of protection.
okay. We agree that all clearing and grading should be confined to the building envelopes?
Correct, yes.
Except for the driveway.
Except for access, okay.
And the mountain.
I do think that some access should be shown when this goes to the ZBA. And if we have to change it, I don't know if that becomes a problem to change it later, but I think you should pick something, Lori.
I can put both access points.
Do some alternate accesses, something so we make some progress on that. Okay, and then comments, we do send comments to the ZBA. Maybe we can, just from the sense of what I got from the board, we could just say that this is a difficult lot with slopes, and what else we might want to say, not say it's good or bad as a map, but just recognize that it's a tricky one to develop,
That's why they're looking at it.
okay?
And I think it's fair to say that subdivision of this lot necessitates, if it's gonna happen, a lot with variance. They're not choosing to ask for this lot with variance because there's no other option.
Right.
Again, I think that their standards based on whether it's a self-created hardship is their decision to make, but,
But we can say that we prefer the two.
Yep, yep.
Of the two lots layouts, that this is the one that we prefer.
yes.
Shouldn't the map that goes to them, though, show the revised easement boundary?
Yes, it would.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
We'll have that to you next.
Okay, everybody good?
Yes, sir.
All right, and what time is it? Oh, we're running a little late. We'll go to our public hearings. Thank you, everybody. The first hearing is Home Team 668. Do you have that, Patty?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Take notice that a public hearing will be held before East Hampton Town Planning Board at Town Hall at 159 Pentago Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, January 11th, 2017, at 7 p.m., or as soon after as this matter may be heard, to consider the application of Home Team 668 LLC site plan approval pursuant to Article 6 of Chapter 255 of East Hampton Town Code to construct a two-story, 1,110 square foot footprint building with the first floor to contain an office/retail use and the second floor to contain a two-bedroom apartment. The parcel is currently vacant. The subject parcel contains 4,100 square feet and is located on the north side of South Euclid Avenue, Montauk, and is situated in a central business zoning district as shown on the official zoning map of the town of East Hampton and is identified on the Suffolk County tax map as parcel 349-112. Subject application is classified as an unlisted action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, Part 617 of the New York Code of Rules and Regulations, in Chapter 128, Environmental Quality Review of the Town Code. A set of plans prepared by Holland, Beck, and Smith Architects PC dated revised December 9th, 2015, including site plan, foundation plan, first, second floor plan, southeast elevation plan, northwest elevation plan, a lighting plan prepared by Holland, Beck, and Smith Architects PC dated received July 18th, 2016, and a planting plan prepared by Holland, Beck, and Smith Architects PC dated January 20th, 2016, are available for inspection at the Planning Board offices, 300 Pentago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, New York, dated December 14th, 2016, and Joe Potter, Chairman?
Uh-oh.
Should I add that?
Eric,
Is that correct?
I hope so.
Okay.
Before you go,
Sorry, John.
before you get started, I don't
Oh,
have
yeah.
affidavit,
Thank you.
publication or posting.
Is there anyone here for the applicant? Did I forget something?
If you
I'll,
want to continue.
Yeah, I'll give you an overview while Mr. Winnicky is handling that. This is the site plan. The proposed building is roughly 1,100 square feet with office and retail on the first floor, two-bedroom apartment above. The property is situated on South Euclid and an alleyway in the north end of downtown Montauk. Parking is situated in the right-of-way at the front of the building. Variances were granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals for the required amount of parking. And I also have elevation and floor plans for members of the public, should they need them.
All right, let's give John a chance to look at that.
Eric, do you have the elevations to pass around here, or are they?
No.
Oh, they are, I got you.
It's actually in the file, so it's fine.
Okay, great. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak on Home Team 668? This is your opportunity to speak at the public hearing on this application. If no one wants to speak, a motion to close the hearing?
Second.
Motion, all in favor?
Aye.
The hearing is closed. And the second is White Pine Knolls.
Take notice that a public hearing will be held before East Hampton Town Planning Board at Town Hall, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, January 11th, 2017, at 7 p.m., or as soon thereafter this matter may be heard, to consider the application of White Pine Knolls final subdivision modification approval pursuant to Chapter 220, subdivision of land, and Chapter 193, open space of the East Hampton Town Code, to amend the covenants and restrictions which limit the allowable clearing to a previously required, more restrictive requirement. The property is Lot 10 of the White Pine Knoll subdivision, which was a 10-lot subdivision. The property is improved with a 2-story single-family residence with accessory structures and a swimming pool. The parcel is located on the south side of Old Pine Drive. East Hampton is situated in an A3 residence water recharge overlay district zoning district, as shown as on the official town zoning map. The town of East Hampton is identified on Suffolk County tax map as parcel number 300-113-1-2.10. Subject application is classified as a Type 2 action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SECRA, Part 617 of New York Code of Rules and Regulations, and Chapter 128 Environmental Quality Review of the Town Code. A revegetation plan prepared by LPS dated November 8th, 2016, is available for inspection at the Planning Board offices, 300 Pentago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, New York, dated December 7th, 2016. Reed Jones, Chairman.
John?
I have the affidavit of service and posting, and it's in proper order. I'll submit it to the file.
Great, thank you.
The
Eric?
applicants are not proposing any physical change to the subdivision. The subject property is Lot 10 of the original 10-lot subdivision. They're just proposing to change the, amend a covenant that required them to have a clearing restriction for water recharge overlay that was in force at the time that the subdivision was approved to the current clearing restriction. So, and also, as part of this application, as a condition, you would accept, if you should choose to approve it, you would accept this revegetation plan as they currently are over clearing.
Is there any member of the public who'd like to be heard on the White Pine Knolls? Forward.
I don't normally speak at these hearings if they're open and closed, but since we have a new member, I thought I would just bring him up to speed. This subdivision was approved right before Water Recharge Overlay District was adopted, and the clearing restrictions on this lot were about, it's a 70,000 square foot lot, and based on the covenants and the planning board approval, that was 10,000 square feet of allowable clearing. And then Water Recharge was adopted, and now we can have 18,000 square feet of clearing. So the applicant's at a great disadvantage compared to every other lot in Water Recharge, and they inherited the lot over-cleared to start with, so we want to bring it back into conformance with Water Recharge overlay restrictions, and that's what that revegetation plan shows. That's pretty much the gist of this whole thing. If the board approves this and makes it fair to our client, like everyone else up there in the hills, we'll revise the covenants and restrictions and get them approved and record them with the county.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard on White Pine Knolls?
Motion to close?
Motion to close. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. And that concludes our public hearings for tonight. All right, what we'd like to do is we have 2 applications for energy storage, and one in East Hampton and one in Montauk, and I think the simplest thing would be to do East Hampton first, because there may be more discussion or questions about Montauk. So, Joanne, it's all yours.
a 17.6-acre site located on Cove Hollow Road. It's cleared and improved with the LIPA or ESCG National Grid substation. It's just south of the railroad. On the northerly side is the industrial area of includes lots and hardscrabble court, and on the other three sides, it's surrounded by residential areas. The zoning, CI zoning splits the northerly 2/3 is CI, the southerly 1/3 of the property is residential zoning district. All the improvements, the proposal is to take access off the existing one and to develop a site behind in this portion, behind the existing substation. According to the project narrative, the objective of the project is to acquire sufficient local resources to meet projected electrical load growth and to support the state's Reforming the Energy Vision initiative. The East Hampton Energy Storage Project was a selected project as a result of the LIPA South Fork Resources request for proposals as a means to meet the expected peak load requirements and will consist of 5-megawatt advanced energy storage system capable of providing continuous power for a duration of up to 8 hours before recharging. East Hampton Energy Storage LLC is a wholly owned entity of Long Island Energy Storage System, which is an entity jointly owned by Next Era Energy Resources and National Grid. National Grid continues to be responsible for operation and maintenance of the existing facilities. The narrative describes it as follows. The East Hampton Energy Storage Project will utilize advanced battery technology to respond to the energy need of the electric system and provide 5 megawatts of continuous power for 8 hours and then recharge. During charging, energy from the power grid is delivered to bidirectional inverters located outdoors. This square represents the proposal, and so you have the building with the battery storage in here. There are 3 inverters on these pads, and then there's a series of equipment pads to the side that are part of the project. So the inverters convert the alternating current AC energy from the power grid to direct current DC. The DC energy then goes into the batteries that are housed within the energy storage structure. During discharging operation, when the energy is needed on the power system, the inverters then convert the DC energy from the batteries back to AC, and the power is stepped up in voltage and ultimately delivered to the LIPA electric grid. From there, the electricity is distributed by LIPA to homes and other consumers. The project narrative states that the battery storage system will be enclosed in a 46 by 90 foot pre-engineered enclosed metal shallow roofed building 15 feet in height with an 8-foot high parapet wall extending above the roof line for a total height of 30 feet. The heating, ventilation, and air conditioning units will be located behind the parapet wall on the roof. The enclosed energy storage structure will contain the battery cells enclosed in modules and stacked onto racks, a battery management system, fire detection and suppression equipment, and a thermal management system. The project is classified as a public utility, which is a special permit use. There are general special permits for us for public utility and specific ones. The project appears to meet the specific ones listed in that the primary purpose is the distribution and delivery of utility to residents, and it's also located in a commercial industrial zoning district. As I stated before, the parcel's split between 2 zoning districts. The coverage that's provided on the maps appears to base coverage based on the entire lot area. In discussions with the building inspector, where the zoning is split, we should be calculating coverage separately. So the square footage of the commercial industrial area of the property should be calculated, and then the square footage of the buildings and total and all improvements calculated on that. So we need revised coverage calculations. According to the narrative, there'll be no full-time staff occupying the site, and there's an area of about 40 by 125 feet where parking for personnel performing routine inspections and maintenance could occur. This appears to be adequate. A landscaping plan was submitted that indicates that there'll be 18 black chokeberry, which is a native deciduous shrub, planted across the back of the building. Across here, then there's a fence that goes around the facility, and then on the outside of that, there are 10 eastern red cedars, which is a native evergreen. We need to know information about the height and the material of the fence, and also I recommend that we get the clearing line, because eastern red cedar requires pretty much full sun to thrive, and if that's being proposed to buffer the residences on the other side, we're going to want to make sure that it's going to be very healthy. So we also need the height at planting included in the key to the landscaping plan. Right now it gives the height at full growth, but not the height that's proposed at the time of planting. A lighting plan was submitted. According to the lighting plan, 6 fixtures are proposed, each with 72 watts, LED bulb having 5,593 lumens. 4 of the fixtures are proposed to be mounted on the building at a height of 10 feet, and 2 on poles at a height of 20 feet. The board's lighting guidelines call for a maximum mounting height of 12 feet and a maximum lumen level of 2,500. Although the foot candle levels don't exceed 0.1 foot candles at the property line, the levels are as high as 9 around the building and 7 beyond the site under review. So on the table of limits of initial illumination in the board's lighting policy call for a maximum of 4 foot candles for parking lots. The use of shut-off controls such as timers or motion detectors or hours of operation of the lighting needs to be addressed. Copies of manufacturer's brochures for the proposed light fixture should be submitted to the file and should demonstrate that the fixtures are dark sky friendly. As I stated, the Long Island Railroad and commercial uses are to the north, and residential uses on the other 3 sides of the site. The narrative includes a noise analysis based on 3 noise-generating components associated with the project: inverters, transformers, and the energy storage structures, heating and air conditioning system. The inverters and transformers will be located forward of the building on the northerly side, and the heating and air conditioning on the roof. There does not appear to be a generator proposed. I think in discussing this earlier with someone, I may have misspoke. I'm not sure if there are 4 transformers going on the pads there, but they need to clarify exactly how those 4 pads will be and how many transformers. The narrative states that 3 noise receptor locations were analyzed. This is a noise contour map that was submitted. And it says that there were, 3 noise receptor locations were analyzed, 1 on each on Horseshoe Drive and Cove Hollow Road in residential zoning districts, and 1 north on Hardscrabble Court. The figure 4 indicates that areas where the project noise will be, there are black lines around the facility that show, and this outer one shows where they've calculated that 50 decibels will be the maximum noise, and that would meet our code. it's within the noise levels permitted by the town code. There are a number of different spots on here where it indicates they may have projected readings. And so I'm not sure when they say Horseshoe Drive, there are 2 on Horseshoe Drive and there are 4 over on Cove Hollow Road. They should specify which of those the readings were for and may perhaps provide readings for all of them, because the neighbors in all those areas are going to want to know what that noise is. The estimated noise emissions data or decibel levels for each source provided by the equipment vendors that was obtained should be submitted. So they've got, for the transformers and the inverters, we should they can give us manufacturer's specification sheets that specify what the decibel levels is, so that we have some backup material, supporting material in our files to justify these noise levels. Also, the noise analysis should be revised to take into consideration noise related to the existing LIPA facility and the cumulative noise impacts. And for additional information, as I said, 4 equipment pads are proposed. The applicant should indicate how they'll be used. We should also have more information on the type of battery proposed in the facility. Are they acid batteries, lithium ion? And some analysis of the, again, manufacturer specification sheets for the equipment should provide more information regarding the potential for any environmental impacts. The site is in the Pine Barrens in the South Fork Special Groundwater Protection Area, and an emergency action safety plan. It states in the narrative that an emergency action safety plan will be developed that will detail response actions and notifications should an event occur. We recommend that should be submitted soon, and that should also describe and address any potential environmental impacts from the battery and other equipment associated with the project. And finally, the project's unlisted pursuant to SEQA, and we recommend that you request lead agency status for the project. But application's incomplete in summary.
Yes. Joanne, can I just ask you about the map that you have up there that is the noise, the noise contours?
Yes.
Is the red supposedly the noise generating equipment? Is that what those red marks are
I
meant to be?
believe so. The applicant should address that, but this would probably represent the heating and air
Right.
conditioning units on the roof, and these probably the transformers or
Right.
whatever,
The
inverters and
inverters.
the equipment that's outside.
I'm just puzzled by the fact that there's no noise contour.
On the bottom, because they're in a
yeah.
building, because the building has a high
I
wall there.
thought it was on the,
So that probably attenuates some of that noise.
okay.
You know what I mean? That's a
I know what
building.
you're saying, yeah. I'm not
I mean,
sure
that's
that
what
it
I'm
does it,
pro-
but yeah,
well,
that's
that's-
maybe the assumption, yeah,
That's why it's showing that, I think.
yeah, okay.
Someone here for the applicant? Several?
Several
Whoever
people.
wants to speak to East Hampton, we'll do East Hampton. And we'll have a lot of questions for you. We've never seen one of these. So
Yes.
bear
Sure.
with us.
Lots
Hi.
of questions.
And we also have a team here that they're going to be answering some of the questions as well. So, good evening, I'm Russ Groffman.
Are you, well, just as a matter of
Ross?
interest, are you all representing both applications, or?
Yes,
is it
it's the
two
same,
separate
it's the
teams?
same team for both
Same team.
applications.
Okay, good. That's easy.
Yep. Hi,
Would you identify yourself?
yes, Ross Groffman for the applicant.
Tell us what you got.
Okay, so we've reviewed all of your comments, and first we'd like to say we understand them and we can address them. So we understand some of the issues that were brought up through the memo, and we have no problem addressing all of them and some of the lighting issues and more requests of information. They're things that we can address and look forward to addressing.
Can you give us an overview of how this works, why it's needed,
Absolutely.
what it looks like on the inside the building?
I'll start with why it's needed and what it is. So there was an RFP, it's called the South Fork RFP, that was done by LIPA and PSEG to solve some of the energy needs in the South Fork. Many people proposed different projects for that. This was one of the projects proposed, and what it is able to do is to utilize energy when it's not needed. So it takes the energy off the grid. It charges batteries. And then when you actually need the energy, the batteries can produce the ability to to power a situation. So whereas a typical fossil generator would run, it uses some type of fossil fuel to run. What this can do is it uses the battery, so it saves the energy. There are times that you don't need energy, but the energy is available. So it's almost like your cell phone, and you charge it up. And here it would typically be charging at night because people use very little energy at night. But during the peak hours in the summertime, which is the most demand of energy you have out here, the battery can run for 8 hours straight. So this was a way to solve a part of your energy problem out here, and it was something that was attractive to the utility.
So this is an alternative to either solar power or wind power. It's just going to store megawatts for when it's needed.
Absolutely, yeah.
The existing generator that's there, is that going to go away?
I can't comment on that. That's not our project, and that's
Nat
something
Grid.
LIPA has to,
Yeah.
and National Grid have to work on it.
So the 8 hours,
Mhm.
this would really take up the slack when you have, during peak periods.
That's exactly what it is.
What happens if we lose power in a hurricane or something like that? Will these batteries function at that point as a emergency source of power, or?
Under certain circumstances. I mean, it's a complicated question. Under certain circumstances, if there's energy in the battery at that time, and it can run, then it can do that, yes.
Even if there's nothing coming from further west?
It would have had to have had the energy in the battery.
Yeah,
So if it was charged,
charged.
Charged at the time
if it's
of
not
the
charged,
loss,
if
yeah,
it's not
charged
charged,
at
then
the
there's no
time.
energy in there.
How long does it take to charge them?
Approximately the same as it takes to use. So
So 8 hours to charge,
approximately
8
8 hours to
hours
charge and
use?
8 hours to use, that's the
Uh-huh.
concept.
And what kind of contribution does that make to shaving the peak
Oh,
demand?
It's 5 megawatts. So what happens is during that period of time, if 5 megawatts is fairly substantial,
Right,
and it does shave the ability to have a problem. In other words, if there's a requirement for energy, and you can use a peaker, which are the units out of there, which can be used. There are other ways of doing it. They could bring more energy from the transmission system, but at some point, you actually need another source.
Yeah.
So this is an incremental source of energy, but it doesn't really utilize more fossil fuels or
yeah,
anything.
no, I totally get that. What I'm asking is how much of a contribution is it making? What, is it 1%?
How many households?
Is it, what is it gonna, how much power are we getting from that?
5 megawatts.
It's 5 megawatts.
Yeah, but what is it,
I can't
compared
really
to how many megawatts do we use? I'm looking for a ratio here. What's the,
The-
no,
Compared to, well, you're, yes, go ahead.
is it 1%?
A megawatt can power about 800 to 1,000 homes.
Okay,
So a lot.
okay,
That's
so
what I was
that's
trying to say, how many
helpful.
households?
Right,
That's how they
right.
usually.
For a period of time, right.
Okay, so 8 households, you're talking about, 8 hours, you're talking about
800.
800 households.
Well, yeah, that's per megawatt. This is 5 megawatts.
Per
5
megawatt, so
Five, okay,
times.
40, yeah, okay.
So it's fairly
40,000.
substantial.
Yeah,
800 per megawatt, so 800 times 5.
so, yeah.
But it's 5.
Residential, residential.
Residential,
4,000.
small typical residential.
4,000 residential homes. Okay, thank you, that
4,000
was
homes
exactly
for
what I
8
wanted to
Yeah,
know.
I knew that's what you wanted.
So,
Households.
So the generator would be running typically at the same time?
It depends on the load. Yeah.
But if we're at a time when you've got max load, let's say in the summer, so, and then the inverters, this application would only make sound mostly when the batteries are being used, when power's being taken out of the batteries? Is that when the inverters make a sound?
The inverters.
When it's coming in?
Jeff, you wanna address that?
Well, here's where I'm really trying to get to. Is the noise measurements that you did, including when the generator is running? I think one thing that the planning department was interested in knowing is what's the background noise when the generator is running?
The cumulative effect.
The
is kind of-
cumulative,
We
when
we
it's all
understood-
going
we
together.
understood your comment.
Okay,
No,
all right.
the information you have to date is what's being emitted from this particular unit. But what we'll do is we'll address your comments.
Okay. I'm just going to, a couple more questions, and then I'll give it back to the board. What happens if can this catch fire, and what are the implications of that? And then also, this will be particularly for Montauk, if water gets into the building, what are the implications of that?
Well, Jeff Burkett from our
can
engineering
leave the
construction
all right, go.
is going to come up and address some of those issues.
Okay.
He's our expert in that area.
So the
I'm sorry, give us your name.
Jeffrey Burkett.
Okay, thank you.
The battery system that's being utilized is an LG Chem product, so it's a packaged cell. It's, there's different technologies that are in the market, lead acid, which is a chemical-based, or a a gel-type facility. This is what they call a lithium-ion NMC technology. So it has an anode and a cathode. And when they put those two products together, they inject an electrolyte into it. Then once they put it through a heating mechanism, that liquid is absorbed into the anode and the cathode, so there is no liquid product within the cell. If the cell were to ever go into an overheat, there's an automated battery system that manages it that checks the temperatures of every single cell within a module. And if anything were to go out of whack, it'll automatically shut it down to where it won't let it charge or discharge. With this technology that's currently being utilized, it's kind of like a Ziploc bag. It looks like a Ziploc bag. So if it does swell it, it'll release a gas vapor, so it won't have that explosion compared to a cylindrical or a prismatic cell that, you know, you've seen in the industry these days.
But there is a potential for it to have some type of leaking.
There is no liquid in it, so there is no leaking.
No leaking.
There's no oil in it, so it's in the transformers, yeah, in the batteries, no. In the transformers, there is a liquid, mineral oil or vegetable oil, so there's containment built around those on these pads. So anything that would leak out of them would be contained.
So is the pad then going to be constructed so that nothing will get into the groundwater or nothing will get into the ground?
That's correct. It's going to have a
Something
containment wall
Okay, 'cause that was
around
one of
the
my questions.
around the transformer for any oil residue that would ever leak.
And if there is a fire, and I think we're gonna have to refer this to the fire department as well, because if there is a fire, I don't know what type of chemical compounds, what type of fire it would be, what you need to put out that type of fire, because you did say that you have some kind of fire suppression in the building itself you're going to have, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But
It'll
the
be water.
outside- I was
It'll
on
be
the light board,
water-based.
so I know a little bit
Okay.
about this. I'm glad I'm not on there, by the way. But, so I think you, that was a horror show. That was not pretty. So, I just wanted to question that, because I think our fire department would have to work with you on what they might have to do if they come and respond to some kind of fire. Because that is woods there, and if it's a dry season and something happens, and I don't know what might spark or not spark from those things would create an issue. So I'm suggesting that you do reach out to the fire department as part of your process,
Yes, we will be.
so that they're aware of what's going on and can be prepared for any eventuality, because there are neighborhoods there, you know, and there are houses in the vicinity. I'm sorry, I just wanted to,
We will also be addressing it with a action plan for
Yes.
them to how to
Good.
approach it.
That's what I'm saying,
and
yes.
how to
You
do
need
any hazard that may appear.
exactly, okay.
And if you get that to us as well.
Can
Yes,
I
sir.
just ask about the gas?
Yes, ma'am.
You're talking about that there's a gas emission if there's an overheating episode with these batteries.
Only if the cell, I don't want to say explodes, because it doesn't explode. If it were to pressurize and it were to let go, it would have a gas vapor that would come out.
Right, so what is this gas vapor?
It's the mixture of the electrolyte, the anode, and the cathode, and we've got a whole table that we'll be submitting with you for the battery technology,
And
so
is
you
it
can see.
flammable?
No, ma'am.
Is it toxic?
It's toxin, and it's not toxin unless it's a huge amount of them that would let go. And we did it on a different hourly rate that you can see. So if the whole entire system were to outgas at one time, which is unheard of, then you would be able to see that ratio. But it's not a toxin. There's no different in this cell, if it were to ever catch on fire, than a household fire or an office fire with plastics and woods and that kind of vapors that come out of it. And there's a full report. DNVL is completing the report with the New York City Fire Department on lithium-ion batteries that's supposed to be released to the public
Good.
within the next week or two, and we'll also be presenting that. And it's with this battery technology that we're utilizing here, so you're going to actually get what was reported for the New York City.
Well, is it my turn still?
Let's
Yeah,
just see if they have
you're the
anything
big
else.
cheese.
Is there anything else you want to present before we? No, there's not. Discuss? Okay,
Okay,
Diana.
so,
All right, we're gonna get, you want questions for these guys?
well,
Let's
I
do
guess-
them while they're,
Oh.
go ahead, Diana, if you want to go ahead. It's
well,
okay. I was just gonna
No, that's
give
okay. I
the
get
board
to
a
do
chance
first
to
and
talk
then-
to them, and then we'll go around to everybody. Whatever.
okay, so, yeah, let me just continue with this. So, Another question is on the lighting. This is a, country type of area, and we're very specific about lighting dark sky, and it seems like have very high poles and very
We'll
high
change that.
lumens.
We'll take
So-
your recommendation.
Okay, great, because,
We'll do exactly what you asked for.
okay, because
Yes,
you're not
no
going to be
problem.
using it any time that's going to be,
It's no
we don't-
problem.
We don't like that, so,
What you ask for in terms of, is usually motion sensors.
yeah. So if nobody's there,
No
you don't
problem.
need those lights. I mean, we don't really care about that. So please, I'm just suggesting that. The next problem that I feel is important is, of course, the noise. Now, I'm very supportive of this. I'm very supportive of the technology. I think this is much better than windmills. These megawatts are very non-obtrusive type, so I'm very supportive of the technology. But the noise is an issue here. It is, an open area with trees, and noise travels when you're in an area like that. So whatever you can do to assuage us of what they are, if we can have the readings, if those were
We'll
areas where you
provide that
did readings
information.
in
Absolutely.
the
We'll provide-
neighborhoods.
As you requested, we're going to provide
Yeah,
that.
so we want it individually when it's working alone, the inverters and the air conditioning units, as well as the composite or the cumulative one with Nat Grid. Because if you had that going and these going and that going, cumulatively, I think that would make a lot of noise. So that would help us to ascertain that. Other than that, I'm pretty supportive, and now we can
Okay,
talk to the
thanks,
rest
yeah.
of the board.
I mean,
So
just to
I'm
be
good.
clear, this doesn't generate power. So it's not a substitute for any other
It
green.
stores
It's only stores power,
Well,
correct?
it stores power
And gives it back out.
and gives it back out, but at the time it's needed, it mirrors what generating power would be. In other words, for those 8 hours, it looks the same way to the grid as if it
It's
was
a
an 8-hour
substitute.
fossil. It's
Yeah,
a substitute.
No, I
the
just
grid,
wanted to be
right,
clear
yeah.
that it's not a substitute, though, for solar or wind or some other.
No.
It's
No,
not a
it's-
power
No.
generating function.
No, it needs energy to
It
make
can't
it work.
make
for
it
those 8
right,
hours.
Something else has
It's
to
a great
generate the
complement to
energy
those.
Right,
to
yeah.
It's actually a
charge a
great-
battery,
It's
yeah.
actually a great complement to those resources.
Okay. Kathy?
Well, I too favor the technology. I think this is a good idea, but I have a lot of questions about your noise analysis, and I wondered if you could just go over with me what those red marks are there. I know that Diana suggested that this parapet wall is going to contain the equipment that's going to be generating some of that noise, and that's why the noise contour is less, I guess that's towards the north, there, on the bottom of the screen. But is there any possible way to put the air conditioners or some of these things that are making noise within the building so that will attenuate some of the noise? Because we know that, walls don't really do it. You have to have a real noise attenuation plan, actual insulating and buffers for that kind of thing.
I'm going to ask Chris Corrado to address some of the
Hi,
noise
good evening.
issues.
Christopher Corrado. So when you look at the red, that is exactly what the lady had mentioned. These are the HVAC systems on the roof. They're standard HVACs that you would find in any building. Unfortunately, you can't really put an HVAC in a building. It usually has to be outside. We did include a parapet wall around it to attenuate that noise and mitigate it. And the reason that you see less of a contour back here is because the inverters and the transformers are outside. So, they would propagate a little bit more because they're outside, but the HVACs behind the parapet wall really have less of an impact because most of that noise now is shielded. Now, that's high in the air, so we felt that shielding that's more important because that would propagate further than a transformer or an inverter on the ground. And most of the noise from a transformer is basically cooling fans and things of that nature, so it's not a piece of mechanical equipment per se, it's an electrical equipment. And somebody asked before when the batteries are running, the HVAC system will run depending upon building temperature, so obviously if it's hot outside or cold outside, the HVACs would cycle on and off just like any building's air conditioning or heating equipment would. And the transformers, again, depending upon what the temperature is, usually it's cooling that you look for with a transformer, so when it's warmer out, you may get more or longer duration of the fans running. So the reason you see more of a propagation this way is more from the outside equipment and less this way because the equipment up here is actually mitigated.
Would it help at all to have the HVACs down at ground level?
It might, but
Noise?
again, when we were designing it, the more things you put at ground level, the harder it is to get an HVAC system to work, so it's designed, obviously not in this building, but if you look at any of the buildings along the road, you know, you put them up on the roof for a reason, because it's, you know, in a household system, you can put an air conditioning unit outside, but usually a building with a flat roof, they'll be on top of the roof. There's advantages to delivering both heat and air conditioning that way. But we did look at different alternatives of where to put them, what sizes they would be. There are, I believe, 4 individual units as opposed to 1 or 2 really big ones. And that helps us deliver the air into the building. But also, again, when you look at these kind of things, it's always a balance between how you engineer something, how you can construct it, and how you can maintain it. And again, this is pretty standard operation for a one-story building to put the air conditioners on the top.
Right, I understand that. Is there any, can you give it another go? Can you take another look at what we can do? Because one of the problems I think we're going to have is there are residences. You know, your land is surrounded on 3 sides by residences. And because these things will cycle on and off on a 24-hour period,
Well,
given the heat, I mean, you know, I know how they work.
oh, okay.
And that's going to create sound at night where no sound is right now.
Sure, so sort of, just to give you an idea, so we went out to 50 dB. If you were to carry this out to where the homes are, you'd be down probably in the 35 or 40 dB, which really is, I'm probably talking louder than 35 or 40 right
Yeah, no,
now.
I'm
Normal
familiar.
conversation is around 35.
Right. No, I understand that, but what I'm trying to get you to understand is we're talking about an area that is really quiet. So when you hear someone's voice in the woods at night, you're like, what is that? Even if it is only 35 dB. So I'm just asking you to
We can revisit
consider.
it, but that was.
I think that would be great.
Again, one of the reasons we settled on this, because it worked. But we can revisit it and take a look at it again. I don't think that we're going to get into a situation where you're going to find anything that is better than that.
One of the reasons they were situated one of the reasons they're situated on the rooftop and the parapet wall is try to contain that noise so it doesn't spread and it goes more in an upward fashion. If you utilize those units down on the ground, it's going to travel at a much lower level. So if they are removed down and you don't have the correct amount of, I guess, barrier between the housing, it's probably going to be worse. So the best solution we come up with from a noise way is put them on top, build a parapet wall that has noise deadening type material, and then you keep it all upward versus letting it go horizontal, the noise. That's one reason why you kind of see the rings get a little worse this direction, I guess you'd say. It's because the inverters are down on the ground. You with me? Are you following that direction?
I'm totally with you. It's just my experience that it doesn't really help that much. You know, the sound just goes over the wall. It's not like it'll eliminate the sound so that if I'm standing right next to it, it's not right at me, but it jumps over the wall. Just ask you to consider more thorough noise mitigation, you know, more than what you're doing. More than what you're doing. Excuse me, because we have so many, excuse me, residences there, and people are already concerned about it. So we need you to do better.
You have to keep the batteries at a certain temperature range, I guess.
They operate in a condition that's no less than like 30 C. Maintain that.
Okay.
So the higher in the heat, the less effective the battery is. The colder the battery is, the less effective. So you got to keep it within a temperature range to give that optimum performance and degradation of them.
Okay. You can't use a heat pump or something to, is that going to be just as noisy?
I think like a cooling tower with like pumps and all are probably going to be worse. These are like self-contained carrier train type units that you have a fan cool unit, then you have the compressor or condenser outside, and that's basically how this is operated. So it's like an office type.
Why don't we wait, Randy, just hold the thought
Okay.
for a minute. We'll get to Ian and
Okay.
come back to you. Okay, Ian.
Yeah, I love this project. I think our town, we're trying to create greener energy. We've actively doing so, and I think that although this isn't generating energy, it allows us to use the energy that is generated more efficiently. So whether it's solar, or probably more specifically wind, that might be able to generate at night when no one's using it, it can be stored, or whatever other, fuel sources there are. So I love the idea, and I think that it fits very well with what our town is trying to do. I think the noise is a concern, but I do think we got to be a little bit careful. I think that our code, highlights what are acceptable noise levels at certain property lines, and you have to take into account not only these units that you're putting in, but everything else that's going on site. And if you do that and demonstrate that you're within the, acceptable range, I'm in favor. I think that as everyone's pointed out, the residential area around it, we want to protect as much as possible. But it seems like you guys are understanding of that and are going to do what you have to do to get there. So just make sure when you're talking about noise, you include everything else that's taking place on site in the area, as opposed to just these units that you're adding. So I think that this is I think this is a great thing for the town. I think it's an appropriate area, and I support the project with a little bit more information that you seem very willing to contribute. The lighting, work with our planning department. You seem very willing to do so. And I think we can hash that out. But we're pretty strict about lighting, and that's also important because of the residential area. But all in all, I strongly support the application.
Patty?
Is there any specific reason for the fence? I'm also considering the Montauk application, so I was just wondering, is there a need for the fence, or that you would put around it?
The fence is just something we do for safety to try to keep deterrents away. Like anybody who wants to climb over a fence will, it's just a deterrent.
Okay.
The question was about Montauk. Certain sites lend themselves better to a fence than others.
And then I guess I'm also concerned with Montauk, but seeing how you're all discussing everything right now, like if there's a hurricane and there's water, what would be the implications to this kind of unit?
Well, should we address?
Let's wait, yeah, let's hold
Should we
that
wait
for
for that?
Montauk.
Okay.
That'll be next.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right, Randy?
Couple of things. There are diesel generators operating adjacent to you, and it's the same landlord, right? Same property owner. So they're storing diesel. They've got a diesel storage facility there. So in the fire analysis, is that the diesel storage, that circular?
Sure, yeah, there's two tanks here, actually, one for the diesels and one for the smaller gas turbine that's up there.
Okay. So it's probably county-regulated, what?
It may actually be DEC regulated.
DEC?
But it's regulated.
Okay. So I just wonder, I think everybody's saying the same thing, that from our perspective and from the perspective of the neighbors, I think the cumulative impact of this public utility kind of includes what's going on next door. It's not really fair to you guys completely, but it is part of the impact. And so I would ask again that you take into account the diesel storage and the noise from next door. The other question I have is about the topography. In terms of lighting and noise, do we know if the topography is dropping off? Is this higher than the residences there, or is it the same or lower?
It's pretty level, there's some
Yeah.
dips and whatnot, but it's not
pretty-
on a hill or in a valley.
Okay. And then, just finally, I see that the area that's outside of the CI zone there looks like it's been kind of abandoned by the utility.
This?
Yeah.
That's the LIPA substation. So this is the LIPA substation up here, and this is the National Grid generating facility. There's actually two facilities.
Ah.
It's being utilized.
Who's the mastermind here? Do you think LIPA and PSEG? Who owns the property?
The property is owned by National Grid, and LIPA has a permanent easement on that property.
So National Grid owns and LIPA is the tenant of National.
I should bring a scorecard.
Yeah.
It's actually an easement on the deed.
Okay. But National Grid owns the property that LIPA runs there.
Their easement is on National Grid property.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Since you have the three entities there, have you coordinated
things are in flux. All of the electrical, our energy needs are being provided by different ways, and there are different changes coming down the road on all of this stuff. Has this been coordinated with those other two entities in terms of site layout, or, because there are a lot of residences around it, and we just want to make sure that this doesn't lock us into some future pattern of development on there that would infringe on the residences more.
You want to take that, Chris?
Well, I work for National Grid,
Okay,
so National Grid is aware of it.
okay, good, good.
And we-
So you got the answer, that's easy.
And
Okay.
Mike knows the layout,
And
shows the project.
It was on the project, the package we submitted obviously had the layouts.
Right.
So I think the,
And
so I think the question is, what's the future, right, Marguerite? What's the future plan for this site above, after this project?
Well, we can't really speak to anything beyond our
But
project.
this seems to make sense on the
Okay.
face, right?
No, we're not quarreling with this project. I think the question is just, if you don't know, you don't know. What's the long-term plan for the site?
I think we
Yeah.
can't, as the applicant here, we can't speak to
All
it.
right.
It's not really
Maybe we can
our
find
right to
someone
do
who
it.
can. I mean, it
But
might
where else
be-
would you move this to
Well,
help?
No, it's not
I
about
mean,
this. It's about
we looked at other
lot of land.
configurations.
Very
on the
hypothetical,
project.
we really don't know what the needs are gonna be if this is, I don't know, I
So
don't think
the
that's
other
a question that
configurations didn't
anybody can answer
didn't
right
work
now.
as well.
They're doing this.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we looked at options when you're designing it, you always sort of look at options in this one.
This is the best.
In our minds, yes, it was.
There
Does
is
that-
a
does that-
lot of land, a lot of CI land left on this site, so.
Yeah.
All right, I guess that's the answer for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're going to go through our list here, and thank you for your cooperation, though, in terms of the stuff in the memo. That's going to help a lot.
And of course, any other question you have from us, we're
Right.
available at any time.
I just have one question for Joanne.
Yeah.
In the memo, when you were reading the section, the background section, you said the parapet wall, you have on the memo here is 23 feet, but you said 30 feet when you were speaking. Is that,
It's 23,
Yeah.
okay, but you said 30, so I wrote, because, that's okay, no, I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure that
The
there
building is
wasn't.
15 feet high?
15 feet with an 8-foot
Okay,
Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to straighten out, because
Total.
you did say 30, and
that's great.
the memo said 23.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I
Let's
just
go
wanted to
through these
clarify.
questions quickly. I think it's going to be easy. Landscaping, you've agreed to work with the department to make those changes
Yes.
and work closely with them. Be the best thing I recommend you do. And the same with the lighting. Be talking to these guys because it'll help a lot.
Absolutely.
Additional information covering noise, that's coming. We're going to get that. You're going to provide the emergency action and safety plan
Yes.
for the town, okay? And Diana, do you want to make a notion?
Yes, I will
a
declare
motion?
lead agency.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think that's it for,
Thank you.
Yeah,
very
Just
much.
one,
Thank
I'm wondering, since National Grid is the owner of everything, if they would consider an easement along the residential portion of their lot as part of mitigation for this project. Just something to talk to them about, like 100-foot,
Really good idea.
150-foot,
What kind of easement?
a conservation scenic easement. So you leave the existing vegetation out.
That area is zoned residential too, they can't.
Oh, yes, the public utility, yeah.
That's a very good suggestion.
So, something like that, so that the questions about long-term use.
Right.
So that we know that the
Some protection.
buffers around the property are not gonna be changed in the future.
Right.
I can't speak for what National Grid is going to do for their property, but I think
well, is there the first question would be whether there's a consensus from the board to ask for this?
Wouldn't hurt.
I think it's a great idea.
Anybody opposed to it?
I don't see the necessity of it, but, I mean, I'm certainly not opposed if they want to do it, but I wouldn't make it a contingency.
we'll take it under
See what you
advisement,
can
but
find
you're
out.
asking the question.
Okay, and then if that happened, it would be, the actual property line, I believe, is Cove Hollow Road to the south, right? It's a little hard to see there, yeah, okay.
That dark blue,
So probably this would not be a concern along the railroad tracks, but more on the other two sides.
right.
True.
What?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
That's a good suggestion. I just wanted to make one other comment, though. This is great, I'm glad you're doing it, but these batteries are going to be powered by fossil fuel generators.
Well, not necessarily.
how
We-
much of a portion of the power is going to be by renewable energy?
Depends on what renewable energy is on the grid.
can
So
store
it's
any-
whatever's on the grid is
I'm
what it
aware,
takes.
but it's largely fossil fuel energy.
Right now,
I mean,
it's-
I don't want people to think these batteries are just charged, it's,
No, but if-
we're charging the battery like you plug your battery in at home. It's the same
But if there's a wind
energy.
project that's operating at night, these batteries can store those as well.
I understand, but at present, there is not. So that's all I'm saying. It's not a clean energy project. We shouldn't be looking at it as a clean energy project.
Well, we look at it as a clean energy project, because what you're doing is, instead of building 5 megawatts more of fossil, you're building the batteries.
You know what, just for the record, I used to work with Gordy and Rocky. I'm a big renewable energy fan. I get it, energy efficiency and all. I'm not opposing it. I just want everybody to have a clearer understanding that these batteries are being generated by the grid as it exists. It's not like this is being fed by a solar panel. That's all. Thank you. Sorry to seem so
right.
cranky.
No,
I'm
no, no,
just
no.
trying to say, this is the reality of it. We shouldn't be like, oh, this is renewable energy.
What's interesting
If
to
you
think
want-
about, though, you are avoiding building the extra 5 megawatts.
I
So that
understand
part
it's
of it.
avoidance,
If
but
you-
you're still pulling off the
All
grid.
right,
Nobody said
I'm gonna
it was
interrupt here.
renewable energy.
Guys,
I know.
let's, if you wanna submit
Well.
something that gives us some
saying
idea why this is an efficient
It
thing,
isn't- it's
we'd be
maybe
happy to
public
have
But we think in the application,
Might
if
have been
there's a certain
cleaner
portion
than
that
it
kind of
is.
gets into that, maybe that addresses it.
All right, I'd like to move us on to Montauk, because we have substantial agenda tonight, and we're halfway through the energy storage subject. All right, okay. So Eric, we're gonna ask you to sit, and Eric will come up and present.
Okay, application is for a 4,154 square foot battery storage building and associated accessory structures. The property is situated on North Shore Road in Montauk and is zoned CI. It borders the train tracks to the north, as you can see here, and all surrounding land uses are commercial, industrial, or utility. The site currently contains a storage yard. This is an unlisted action under SECR, and we recommend that you declare lead agency status. The general layout meets all the coverage requirements, however, it needs 3 setback variances. A setback variance of 24 feet from the front lot line is required. A setback variance of 7 feet from the eastern property line is required, and a setback variance of 11 feet from the rear property line is required. The board should discuss the general layout proposed, noting the triangular shape and substandard size of the lot, which constrains the facility. However, the board should also determine if the scale of the facility is appropriate, as this also results in lesser setbacks for which variances are needed. Page 11 of the narrative references that an emergency action and safety plan for the facility will be formulated. The applicant should discuss this issue with the board, and more detailed information should be provided at this time. The subject parcel itself is not in a designated flood hazard zone, however, the majority of the immediate area is. This is the FEMA firm map. AE flood zone is in orange. This is the subject property. We note that the Second House Road, the approach to the facility from Second House Road is in the AE flood zone, as is the approach from the east along Industrial Road. And you should also note that the nearby substation here is in AE elevation 8. Most of that area in the AE zone is an area that would be inundated by a 100-year storm. Most of those areas are modeled to be covered in 2 to 3 feet of floodwaters. Additionally, overland storm surge is expected to impact most of these areas in a Category 1 hurricane, not the subject parcel itself, but this orange you can see here, again, in all those areas, would be directly impacted by storm surge. The board should require more information about what will be done in the event of storms and flooding. For example, will equipment be removed ahead of time? How will technicians get to the site if the area is flooded? Should the nearby substation or power lines be damaged, how will the site function, if at all? And then additionally, another question we'd have at the outset is there a risk of fire, electrocution, or chemical contamination if the facility is directly affected by a storm? They did submit a noise report, as they did for the East Hampton facility. The noise report indicates that they meet the town requirement and all of their property lines. Again, they're surrounded by almost all commercial property, with the exception of the property line to the north, which is actually the train tracks, the MTA Long Island Railroad. They'll need a variance from that standard. They do not exceed the sound limitation on the nearby resident, well, about 150 feet over the train tracks, residential neighborhood. But they do need a variance for that. The landscaping, basically consists of just a row of choke cherry and then eastern red cedars. That's the same plants they proposed in East Hampton. This area is very industrial. This is generally acceptable, but you should determine if additional screening is needed, whether or not fences should be added along the side here of this other property or to the rear, whether or not that's adequate at the front. And lighting. And also, I guess, to give you an idea of their visual rendering of what that looks like. Basically, it's a low hedge and a couple of trees, so it's not a lot, but again, this is a very industrial area. So lighting. I'm assuming this is not going to be an issue because I heard the applicants say it wasn't before, but the fixtures they chose exceed 3,000 Kelvin. That's a code requirement. They need a variance, so they should change the fixture. And then additionally, you can't see unless I zoom all the way in there, at the entranceway, they have about 10-foot candles, which is 5 or 4-foot candles is recommended under the code. So they should choose alternative fixtures. And I guess the remaining elements, ARB and fire marshal comments are still pending. The town engineer did have 2 comments. I will abbreviate them. He speaks of a road encroachment that exists, and he's saying that onto their property from the town's roadway. He says that this must be maintained, or they need to extend the road on the other side, extend the pavement on the other side of the road, and that they might need to move their landscaping. I would direct the applicants to speak directly with Tom Talmadge, the town engineer, about that. And then he says that the front of the building, you can't see it too well on this plan, but on this one you can. Basically, the compound itself would be like stone, gravel surface. This hash mark area, he's saying should be asphalt. The aprons into it, the area in there, and then whatever's going to be parked over there. So the application is incomplete, pending the resolution, the aforementioned issues and submission of the required items. I think that at this time, what you should do is, I think the main problem here is the vulnerability to flood damage and storm, direct storm impacts. I think you should require as much information from the applicants at the outset as you can possibly get to determine if the site, again, the site itself is like this little island in a sea of flood hazard zone. So they meet the base flood elevation, but you need to determine that this facility can actually function if the entire area is inundated. So.
Would applicant like to come up?
Hello.
Welcome back.
Nice to see you again. So we will, similar to the East Hampton comments, all of the comments that you've provided, we understand and we can address them. With regard to the flood question, what's important to remember is this site was designed to not be impacted by a flood. And by that meaning, it's, as it was mentioned in the application, it's elevated above the hazard zone, as well as it is designed to still operate through that. And because it's a remote site, it can operate through that. So if there is a flood surrounding it, this site is elevated, it's out of the flood zone and can operate and function. So it's designed to work in that environment. And to address some of the questions that were asked on how we would prepare for that type of event, we can do that as well if you have specific questions.
Do you know what the elevation of the first floor is in your building?
It's approximately 9 feet, correct? Which is 2 feet above the flood hazard zone, over 2 feet, actually. So we've designed it to accommodate for that.
So what happens, and because I think we know it's a changing world with sea level rise and so forth, and this whole area of Industrial Road floods on a regular basis with storms. What happens if we get a catastrophic event and flood water is getting into the building at the 9-foot level?
Well, I believe that we're elevated in a 1 in 500-year flood, so that's a very unlikely event.
Right.
If that happens.
But,
But if it happens, I'm going to have Jeff address that.
okay.
But it is important to note the elevation of it, that it was built up to. Deal with that.
Good question. The system is designed to operate as long as the grid can take or deliver power one way or the other. If the surrounding area where the substations currently are that service that area do get saturated, they're going to go offline before the battery system. Battery system is monitored remotely. So it has system checks and balances that follows, can it move power and can it take and or discharge power? So the question of, hey, if it floods, what do? We'll do a storm preparedness plan like we do with all of our facilities on a 72-hour, 48-hour, 24-hour plan. And we will stage equipment such as what we call water buggies or boats, and or if we need to, helicopters to where we can access this plant no matter what the catastrophe is within the area. So as an asset to a power utility company, we always look at how do we control that and protect public safety being number one to us.
So let's say, let me just follow. Let's say we have 12 feet of water, and now you've got 3 feet of water in the building. What happens to those batteries in that case?
So the system will be shut down to where it won't charge or discharge, and the batteries will just sit stagnant. They'll probably not be any good anymore. When we get done and we dry the system out, we'll have to go in and probably replenish the whole entire system at that point in time.
Is there anything in the battery that's going to be a concern of getting in the water?
Yeah,
What type of,
toxicity, yeah.
toxins?
They're a sealed component unless there's a catastrophe of, them exploding, which these cells do not. You're going to get that report here shortly that's going to show. There's no way for any of the product to get out. And it's not a liquid. That's what you got to remember. This is not a liquid component like you're used to seeing in other technologies. This is a semi-solid state battery that has no liquid in it.
So what happens when the water gets in them? How does?
No water can get into them. They're a sealed
So then
package.
but you just said that if the water gets up to 12 feet, then you'd have to replace the whole thing. So what?
The
batteries
electrical
on, or-
components, so there's what they call a battery management system, which is kind of like a computer brain, like your hard
Okay.
drive. That would get wet, we'd have to go in and replace it. The battery itself wouldn't be affected, it would just be the components that support the battery that would be affected.
We're thinking Fukushima here.
Yeah, let's, we're going to go to Patty in 1 sec. But I would want to say one thing. Nancy Keeshan's not here. She would normally be the committee person on the board. I just want to throw this 2 questions, and then Patty will go to you. Are there other places where these have been built and they're operating?
That's a good question.
We just completed some projects in Maine. Florida has them. Illinois, Pennsylvania, Texas, the West Coast, California. We've got multiple sites.
Period of years these have been in operation at this point?
The battery industry, as everyone knows, is a new emerging kind of technology. So if you look back over the last 2 years, we've deployed probably the most of that within the United States. So if you would like to see one of these, we'd be more than happy to show you one of our
Fly
facilities.
us up to Maine?
I don't know about fly you,
California would be nice.
we would be open unless Ross says differently. We would be more than happy to show you what one of these.
Are
is.
they
so one-
coastal locations?
Closest to the coast would be, we have a facility in the Everglades down in Florida, and we have one at Miami. So down, Florida's pretty low. And we had to build that one about 6 feet up just to get it out of equal to water level.
So next era owns Florida Power and Light. Just to be clear, so all of it. So our company, parent company of this, owns Florida Power and Light as well. So some of the lessons learned in technology of developing and building this stuff in Florida, which is probably one of the highest areas we have to deal with this, is stuff that we put into our planning and how we look at stuff. So we really leverage the understanding that we gain from being an owner of a major Florida utility.
Just before we go to the board, one more thing. In the bigger picture, for the town, this area of Industrial Road where there's a substation, there on Fort Pond, and the town's longer-term goal is to see that substation moved and gotten out of the floodplain. So wouldn't committing to this, I guess the two questions, is it important that this battery be near that substation? And if this battery is built, isn't that kind of a longer-term commitment to keeping the substation and all of these operations in that floodplain?
I can't address what LIPA's doing and what they're doing with their substation, but I can address the location of, there is an energy need in Montauk. This is an industrial area within Montauk. We are building well above the flood hazard zone. So if you put those issues together, if they want to move a substation, there's no reason a substation can't be moved and used. This project is placed where it is because of its location and its importance in energy, and it is an important energy location in Montauk.
So it's not important that it be, the substation and the battery be
Well, at some
within
point,
a
they have
certain
to be,
distance of each other?
The proximity.
well, at some point, it has to be connected.
No, but I'm saying, could they be a quarter of a mile apart?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if right now, yes, if it can be more than that. It depends on how long you want to build the cord to it. But
Or the battery site could be, not, if it were not this site, there could be an alternate site that would be higher above sea level that could potentially work, if such a site existed.
Right, but I will tell you, when we looked to respond to this RFP, we looked throughout the entire area of Montauk. We found this area for numerous reasons. One, there is an electrical infrastructure requirement there. Two, it is an industrial area. Three, this particular site was higher. So we did do a lot of looking around, and that's why we chose this site. We put a lot of time and effort into actually picking this site. So I don't know if that directly addresses your question.
No, it does. I
Some
think it's
insight
just,
into it.
you're probably getting a sense, a lack of confidence, at least from some of us, and we're going to go to the board now, that we know that water travels all through that area and that this site potentially could be threatened, regardless of the FEMA map.
And I think the key is to elevate it, hopefully the way, in a way that we've looked at and thought that, so we're elevating it beyond where it is right now. The site's already out of that zone, so it's the further elevation we're doing above the hazard level that is additional incremental protection from where it is right now.
Patty, finally.
Yeah, do I remember anything? If the substation goes out, and this is connected right to the substation, then this will go out as well, correct?
Yes.
Because the substation is really right on Fort Pond and.
But
and would
that's, my
definitely
understanding
flood.
is that substation is not likely to stay there in a long period of time, right? I mean,
Well, okay, that's hypothetical, I don't know. Right now, something's there.
Yes.
So my question is, that's more likely to flood first, before.
Oh, absolutely.
where the battery is, so therefore, if that floods, the battery is.
Yes.
is incapacitated, right?
yes. But by
Okay.
the way, if that substation flooded anywhere, you would build something, it would go through that part of the zone, right? If that's a core substation, if we build the project, another mile up the hill, or in some way, it's still gonna go to that substation, so they don't really solve that problem.
Oh, really? Is that how that?
That's the main substation.
How does it
right?
get connected? I just.
There's a big, long cord.
Extension cord. In terms that I can understand, it's an extension cord. Okay, I got it.
Ground, right, the wires,
The cable.
the connection from you to the.
Well, the connection to the existing substation, I believe, is being planned
Underground.
Underground.
Very,
Okay.
right.
So that was a question. And I mean, it's really choked in that area. Is there any way would one think to make it a little bit smaller?
No.
That's.
What we've done is we've been able to optimize this project by putting it in a building. I mean, that's an incremental, expense and burden. A lot of our other battery projects are in containers spread out. We put the incremental investment in to be able to utilize the property better, to make them prettier and nicer here, frankly, by putting them in a building. They don't have to be. This was out in a farm somewhere. You'd see a whole line of containers. And this is a much bigger, this is a different type of technology that we thought was appropriate for the land use here as well as for the aesthetics of the area. And the property's tight. So in order to do that, instead of spreading it out. Right, so instead of spreading out, we did that. So this is a very much optimized site.
Okay. I know you addressed the lighting, so we won't go into
Not a
that.
problem.
And obviously, one of our concerns, as you've seen, is the emergency plan, because that may not flood, but everything floods all around it. Let's see. I do want to declare lead agency.
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to get the, who's second, Diana?
Yes, I did.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Okay, I guess that's, yeah, the layout, it's just, there's no other way to lay it out, that's it.
Trust me, we've put this man's had a lot of sleepless hours laying it, but yes.
Okay, all right, continue.
Randy?
So this one's indoors and the one in East Hampton's not?
No, it's the same.
No, they're
Oh, they're both indoors?
Yep, they're both exactly the same.
And the HVAC's on the roof here?
Same design.
Same thing?
Yep.
I don't know if you, well, we have someone who works for National Grid, so you got to see Sandy come to Long
I'm
Island.
originally from Long Island as
Okay.
well, so.
And all of the unexpected flooding of infrastructure, sewage plants, et cetera. So I guess you guys are well aware of that.
I think between both companies' experience, National Grid and, of course, our company's experience in Florida, and throughout the country, we build projects throughout the United States.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of that.
It's not good business to get wiped out.
No.
So-
Which is an interesting point, by the way. Obviously, you could think for us protecting our own equipment, we have a vested interest in making sure this project is safe also.
Yes.
From an investment standpoint. So we're doing, when we look at this, we want to make sure that when we build a project, it's going to last and it's going to be good. And if there's a little storm, our project's not going to be wiped out. So before we make, this is a major investment for us, right? Before we make a major investment, we think about all of those issues as well to make sure we're comfortable building it for our own corporate analysis.
Okay.
So that's another layer that really we haven't spoken about, but it's important.
Yeah.
We're not going to build where we think we're going to be at risk of losing our project.
So I'm curious about the role of National Grid here. Is National Grid is National Grid going to take the lease here or buy this property?
I'll explain the role.
Okay.
So NextEra and National Grid are joint venture partners in a company called LI Energy Storage. LI Energy Storage owns these two companies. And what we do is, as our joint venture, we will build and operate the project, and that joint venture will do that. So this is a lease that'll be controlled by the joint venture.
Okay.
So the lease will be with Montauk Energy Storage, there'll be a lease with Montauk Energy Storage and the landowner.
And then the substation,
That's
the
not-
road, who owns, do you know who owns that?
The property, the land,
The land and who operates that station?
PSEG LIPA operates it, and National Grid owns the land.
So
Correct, Chris?
I guess what I'm getting at here is that National Grid is a major player in both of these projects, and that there are things that the board may want to discuss, what National Grid can do, maybe in a larger way than just, changing some of the lighting, that's all. I'm thinking, maybe it's an opportunity for a discussion with National Grid.
It is, just to be clear, though, it is a joint venture
It's a joint
in a separate entity, so there is a, this is a joint venture entity, it's not a National Grid per se entity.
We didn't talk at all, and we're going to go to Ian in a sec, about noise from this application. Did we have similar mapping and so forth?
Yes.
And that's in the application?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Ian?
Well, you heard my comments on the last one. I'm a huge fan of this idea, this technology. I think it fits very well with what our town is trying to do, which is be more sustainable with energy. And Kathy brought a good point, which is, yeah, if this is storing energy at night, you're still running a diesel generator, that's where it's coming from, but it allows us to store energy that might come from more renewable resources. So I think it's a great idea, and I think that storage of energy has been a problem for a long time, and so I'm happy to see this technology is now available. That being said, I was highly skeptical of this site because of everything that we've talked about, flooding, safety. Is it the best place? I think that you guys have gone a long way to alleviate those concerns. I would want to know more about safety hazards in terms of, I know you want to protect your own project, and I appreciate that. And frankly, it's not my business if your project gets wiped out and you lose a lot of money. My concern is that people aren't getting electrocuted and there's not battery acid leaking into the bay. So I would want to see a little more information on that.
Well,
Worst case scenario, and if everything's contained, the batteries can sit underwater without leaking out and your circuit board is broken, I'm okay with that. It sounds like set it so that it's high enough that that's unlikely in your mind. The variances are another problem. I do think that this site in particular, because of the industrial area, would lend itself towards granting of those variances, because you're not in a residential neighborhood like the other site where you have a lot more space. So, you know, I'm tentatively coming around to this project if you can show that in some catastrophic event that, you know, a LIPA worker is not getting electrocuted because of, you know, water conductivity, or there's not battery acid leaking anywhere. I know you said there's not a liquid, so pardon my ignorance of my terminology, but those are my big concerns. Otherwise, you know, I think that I support the project. And sound, this is not as sensitive of an area because it's not residential, but you still have to show that whatever's happening from these units you're putting in combination with the other things on the property, aren't going to cause a problem. Because we have to assume that at times, during peak hours, that generator is going to be running. You know, LIPA's, when energy is needed, everything's going to be working at the same time. We've got to make sure that there's not a huge amount of noise spilling over onto neighboring properties. And I think you've probably already done that. I should look through the file more carefully, but otherwise, I like what you're doing.
Patty, you want to?
Yeah, I just want to interject that there are some houses on Navy Road. There are some small houses that are
Well,
on the other side of the railroad
To
track.
me, when it comes to sound, yeah, absolutely. When it comes to sound, I think that what's allowed by our code is what I want to go by. I mean, we have rules about, you know, daytime, nighttime, property lines. I don't want to be arbitrary in saying that you can't have any noise in an industrial site, but I think we do have to be sensitive towards what our town allows and what you're proposing here. Again, not only your project specifically, but everything that's happening on site and in the area. So,
And I think it's an important point that, you know, when I know what we've spoken about before, but both of these projects are fully within your noise guidelines. And just to address what we were talking about before, they're below any noise rules that you have, and we've designed it as such. So we were very aware of that when we designed the project.
and also to clear up a little confusion, I don't think that this is designed as a project that's going to keep us electricity around when electricity is not available. If there's a bad storm and we lose power, this is out too. That's not the goal.
Right.
The goal is to meet our peak needs under normal circumstances. And my concern is that it's safe and environmentally friendly under bad circumstances. Even though my light's not going to come on, we're not doing any damage.
Well, that's good perspective to understand what you're thinking about, because we'll take that back when we address it.
Okay, Kathy?
I agree with most of what our previous board members have said, but I have two concerns. One is that the FEMA maps, as useful or utile as they might be, I don't think are an accurate reflection of what actually occurs there. And as people who live in this community, we'd just like to advise you in terms of protecting your investment that I think you should consider building it up a little higher if you can do it. I just don't think it's, if it were me, I would be doing that, because Superstorm Sandy wasn't even a Category 1 hurricane, and we had so much flooding, it was insane. And that area floods all the time. That area floods during a regular storm, and we know that our storm patterns are intensifying. We get more water with our rainstorms and so forth, not to mention the coastal, you know, the sea level rise issues that are also going to affect that. The one question I have, and you may not be able to answer this, but I think it's something worth considering, is that we're being asked to look at this, and I support it generally. I have no, apart from the flooding, which I think you'd be well advised to raise it a couple more feet. Just saying. And and I see that you need the size of it for the site. It's an oddly shaped lot. I get all that. You know, I think the variances will make sense. But I feel as though I'm being asked to determine this in isolation to other, you know, utility infrastructure needs. And I wonder where this fits into our town's plans for, you know, resiting the substation at Fort Pond, which is something we've been discussing because it's so low to the ground. I know you can't comment on that specifically, but perhaps you can go back to NatGrid and ask them, you know, because it feels a little, you know, like these are satellite projects, and where does it all fit into the larger picture? And it applies to a certain degree what Randy pointed out earlier at the East Hampton site too, where you have the, the substation and then, and I know it's a complicated set of, LIPA owns some of it or leases some of it, and it's sort of a
I just
minefield.
wanted to clarify, National Grid does own the Fort Pond property, where we did have diesel generators, which we had just demolished, we're just about finished. LIPA does have a permanent easement on that substation, and we have nothing to do with the PSE&G substation or any decision they make. It's strictly.
Really?
in
It's important to
PSE&G.
think about LIPA and PSEG,
Okay,
and not National Grid or us for
It has
sure.
nothing to do with the electric.
We bid into it,
Yeah.
a bunch of other people, right, gave proposals on how to solve the energy needs.
Yeah.
And LIPA and PSEG, based on their understanding of the energy, not National Grid. I mean,
Right.
LIPA and PSEG, based on their understanding of the energy system and their energy needs, makes the decisions of what projects best fit with their
Yeah, and I
plans. So
understand.
Like you addressed, I can't really address beyond
Right.
that on that one.
Well, we should just be thinking about it. It just seems like it's in the interest of good planning, which is this board's responsibility.
But in effect, effectively, it's independent. Like, you could have this storage facility with energy being generated anywhere in the area if you pay for whatever size wire you need to
Yeah.
connect it, right? I mean, it's a visual blight, so it makes sense to pair it in an area where
Right.
there's already this type of generation going on. But functionally, it's not necessary. I mean, your product doesn't depend on that substation
You're
being
not
there.
locking that substation
No.
at that position by putting your batteries.
We're interconnecting into that substation initially. If LIPA tells us we need to interconnect to a different
Elsewhere.
substation, we're going to
You
interconnect
can
to
do
that
that.
substation.
Right.
So it makes
it's
sense
just
at
a
the time,
matter-
but it's not contingent on that.
Right.
No, we could move, we
Yeah,
could
and
run a
that's-
line to a different substation.
that-
The prize, you guys, the adjacent property, whatever they look at, we could
Right.
run our line to whatever they end up doing.
Right. That's not where I was going with the question. I was just trying to see if there was any way to coordinate all this, because it has an effect on our community. From my point of view, I really need to see your emergency evacuation plan. That's got to come top of mind for me. And I would ask you to consider to raise it a couple more feet in spite of your FEMA maps.
Okay, we'll take that under advisement.
I'll be merciful, everything has been said.
Question for the attorney.
Sure.
John, so we have a special permit in both applications here for the storage. And we've been talking about our town code as far as noise, the decibel levels. But in the special permit consideration, the compatibility with the neighborhood is somewhat of an independent judgment from the code standards for decibels.
Yes and no. I mean, certainly, we have set forth decibel limits, and if the project is below those standards, it's meeting the code requirements. If you're talking about environmental impact type of a analysis on noise,
Yeah, and that it's a special permit use, which,
well, has to comply with all the special permit standards that are in the code. One of which is the general standards of being compatible with the area and the uses in the area and that sort of thing. I don't know if that answers your question.
compatible with the uses in the area, one of the pieces of evidence you could use would be to say, well, it doesn't meet the noise standards,
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
hypothetical.
Does that answer the question, or?
I guess my question is whether we can want more stringent noise abatement than the code requires because it's a special permit use.
I don't know if that's an element of special permit standards for this
Well,
use.
You require
Forward.
additional noise abatement to meet that special permit standard.
Yeah, I
You
don't know what this,
You could say, well, we don't feel it's compatible with the neighborhood because it's not meeting the code requirement on noise, therefore we want more noise abatement. And I mean, in this case, you do have applicants that are going for variances from the noise standards. It is at the property line that's on the train tracks, not any of the surrounding uses, which are mostly industrial. But that would be something that would not be compatible with the neighborhood if it creates a noise disturbance.
And also, this is a noise projection using some operating level of the HVAC. I don't know what operating level of that equipment you're using. Are you using the,
That's a good,
Wanna address that, Chris?
So when we do a noise model, we use a computer simulation, and we feed into it what the manufacturer's noise reading are on their piece of equipment. It takes the height the equipment's at. It takes all the different things that you'd think, mainly worst case. So when we look at the noise and we do an isopleth, looking at where it is against the property boundary and whatnot, that's a worst case situation. That's with all 4 HVAC units running, that's with the 3 inverters on, that's with the transformer and all its fans on.
On like a still day with no wind, or,
Well,
you know,
when you do a noise model on a piece of equipment like this or a thing like this, there's really no factors in the back of what the ambient noise is. You want to know what that piece of equipment is against the town standard. So when we run that, it's worst case with the piece of equipment, and then we look at where the property lines are.
But to be direct, we're not looking at the air conditioner at half load and using
Right,
that.
it's
We're
worse,
using as if
everything is on.
everything is, the
Okay.
AC's working, the inverters are working, and everything's going.
And to give you an example, when we did, and we don't have the isopleth up here, but when we were doing noise for this site in particular, and it's always, I mentioned before, it's always a balance. So when we looked at where can we put the equipment because it's a tight site, where the noise impacts are, we've incorporated sound mitigation walls not only as a parapet wall but around the inverters. And what ends up happening is with a 10-foot wall, we're okay everywhere, including the residents up here, except for that little spot over there that's on the railroad tracks. So either we raise the walls up a little bit higher, which we need a variance for that, or we ask for the variance for that. And the other things obviously we look at is things like, well, if we put everything closer together, but then you look at, you know, do you have site access? Can you get vehicles in behind it that you need to do maintenance? Or, you know, if there's ever an emergency, can you get an emergency vehicle? So you look at all of these factors when you try to do a mitigation plan. And in both cases, we feel that we came up with the best noise mitigation we could, and we'll look at other configurations. We already have, but maybe we'll include some of those. But again, it's always a balance between what you can do and what you need to meet and all those goals. But it's always at worst case. It's always with everything running.
and the type of equipment you're selecting,
Yeah, that is a big,
right? Some equipment is quieter than,
well, when we were looking at some of the inverter manufacturers.
Yeah, the equipment that we selected, we went with all the noise mitigating fans, motors. So we went to the technologies that we know that is reliable and work, and found the most efficient pieces of equipment. So I think, you know, when you look at inverters, they've got some noise panels that you can get inside, we got that. The fans that you can get inside that are low projection fans, we got those. The same thing on the AC units. We evaluate that whenever we do these tests too.
okay.
Because at the end of the day, we don't want to have any impact to the community because we want to be a good neighbor. So the easiest thing to do is do the best thing first. And that's what we always try to do.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm the last on the board on this. You mentioned, though, you're doing 10-foot walls around the inverters in Montauk?
Yes.
For noise deafening?
Yes.
So that, if that were necessary, could that be done in East Hampton?
Well, in East Hampton, what you have is on, first of all, on the part between, and we designed the project specifically this way. You have the peaker on one side, you have the inverters, then you have the building on the other side. So the building is a major sound barrier.
On one
So-
side.
On East Hampton.
Right.
And on the other side is the entire existing power facility, which also serves as a
Right.
mitigant from the inverter. So that project was designed so specifically, actually, to use that to mitigate noise. Whereas here, you don't have that option, so we had to build the walls.
And again, in East Hampton, there's an awful lot of property, so when you look at where your town code sits, it's well inside the property lines.
Yeah.
Whereas this is, the property line's very close. and you
Well,
have
it's a different kind of piece of property. So we had to build a wall because you couldn't do that noise type of wall.
Okay,
Hey, Mr. Fraze.
so looking to sum up?
Can I say one more thing?
Sure, yeah.
You know, I'm not,
No comment.
I'm not concerned about the noise and the railroad tracks, but just so you cover all of your bases, and I don't know what the properties, the next one over is, but you should make sure that the sound is not a problem on those properties as well.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And, you know, part of my ignorance is probably not an issue, but if you ask for a variance where the train tracks are, I don't think anybody cares.
No, we know that.
If it goes beyond that
Yeah,
to the next.
we've done
person.
that work, and we
Okay.
know it's not a problem with the residences beyond that.
Okay. All right, just to quickly go through, so my only comment is I remain uncomfortable with this location in terms of flooding, and I think, you know, we're looking at, 30-year projection, or what's the useful life of this?
20-year project.
Okay, so we don't really know what's going to be going on in 20 years in there, but I still have concerns about the water question. I think we said that the proposed layout was generally acceptable. You're going to provide the emergency action plan?
Yes.
You're going to work on the lighting and the landscaping?
We'll comply with your
Right,
request.
okay. All right, so I guess you know what you need to do. All right, let's move on. Thank you very much,
Thank you
everybody,
very
for
much.
coming.
Good evening.
Good presentation.
Sperber. You can have a sip of my water if you don't.
Patty's guarding hers. Thank you, Joe. You're welcome.
Now you know.
Sperber.
So we're on.
We're on.
We're always
It
on.
never goes off.
There's no privacy up here.
The applicant proposes to construct a 3,500 square foot, one-story metal building to be utilized by a landscaping and property maintenance business. It includes a 1,150 square foot office space. The parcel is approximately 25,500 square feet. It's zoned commercial industrial and located at the intersection of Muir Boulevard and Old Fireplace Road. There has been no prior approvals for commercial use on the site. A narrative submitted to the planning board stated that the applicant was seeking approval for his landscaping business to utilize the site, but was retaining the right for a second use. And 2 service commercial uses are permitted for 20,000 square feet, so there isn't the possibility of a second service commercial use utilizing the site. The coverage calculations were revised to include the 2 designated outdoor storage areas, and the project has demonstrated that it still meets zoning. The site plan depicts a line that's labeled as existing limits of clearing, and notes the existing clearing is 58.7% of the property. The site plan also notes that the proposed clearing is 81.6%, but does not show the proposed edge of clearing or areas that will be uncleared. It's noted that none of the town's clearing restrictions apply to this lot, and the Pine Barrens clearing restrictions for commercial lots, which are 65%, are advisory only. It is also noted that aerial photographs in the town's GIS system show that all the clearing on this lot has occurred since 1984, and most since 1994 without the required site plan approval. The parcel is located in the Pine Barrens and South Fork Special Groundwater Protection Area. The nutrient-poor sandy soils and naturally occurring vegetation of the Pine Barrens ecosystem help promote water recharge and provide microbes in the soil that help recharge clean water. Retaining any remaining oak trees within and revegetating the 40-foot deep buffer area that's proposed along Muir Boulevard with native species is recommended. The plans do not depict the berms on the site along Muir Boulevard or Old Fireplace Road as either existing, remaining, or to be removed. In the evaluation form, it was recommended that the berms be depicted with the existing and proposed topographic contours. It should be demonstrated that the proposed grading, right now the grades down at the road are 114. The site plan shows a maximum grade of 116. However, if you're standing down there, it's at 4 to 5 feet. There's a rise of 4 to 5 feet in the front that's not accommodated. The grades on the small red circles on here, which indicate proposed grades of 114, which means that as this site plan is proposing that the whole site will be level. And that's significant. There's a cluster of oak trees here. We want to make sure that they're able to retain those, and also that will make the site, the outdoor storage areas and the parking of the big trucks more visible from Muir Boulevard, which is a primarily residential street, and maybe make screening more important. Right now, they're proposing the landscaping plan. Right now, the landscaping plan along Muir Boulevard in the 40-foot vegetated area has mostly red fescue grass and then several clumps of river birch and some inkberry. So that doesn't really provide the screening that, or sufficient screening. We recommend that instead that there be some more native plantings such as more oak trees, white pine, pitch pine, and maybe the inkberry that's proposed there be interspersed and it become more of a natural area. The size of the inkberry is given as 3 gallons. Height can vary with a variety of inkberry. For example, 3-gallon Ilex glabra is only 15 to 18 inches in height. Therefore, the species of inkberries and the actual height of planting should be indicated on the key. The river birch that's proposed is native to eastern United States, but its native habitat is wetland areas, and it's considered an ornamental tree in higher, drier areas, and it's deciduous with a relatively narrow canopy that may not provide significant screening. We recommend that the applicant proposes to use that be moved maybe more up towards the office area and where the conference rooms are, and in an area where more ornamental vegetation may be more appropriate. The board had asked for a split rail fence to contain the parking, to make sure that in the outdoor storage, so it doesn't start spilling over into the 40-foot vegetative area. The plan doesn't indicate a fence at this point. It has a row of shrubs that aren't really labeled. The key has some privet that are unaccounted for, so I can only guess that maybe those are the privet. Because privet is slightly invasive, and this is there are remnants of forest around here. We don't recommend the use of privet on this site. Also, the board had agreed to allow, the outdoor storage areas are approximately 2 and 3 feet from the property line, and the board had agreed to relax setbacks for those areas with appropriate screening, or had said they would consider it with appropriate screening. Right now, what's proposed are a type of forgetting. A type of rose of Sharon or hibiscus, which is the one listed, or Hibiscus rosa sinensis, is the U.S. Department of Agriculture listed as a tropical variety, only surviving in warmer climates and not really acclimated to this area. So a different plant variety would be recommended. We don't have a lighting plan at this point. That will need to be submitted. And an application submitted to the zoning board for a front yard setback variance was deemed incomplete pending clarification of total coverage and an agreement from the planning board on the general layout and relaxation of the accessory structures. The total coverage calculations have been revised, so if the board finds the layout and storage areas setbacks to be satisfactory, the applicant will be able to proceed with the variance application, and we note that you can't deem the application complete or schedule a public hearing for it because it doesn't meet zoning right now, so they need a front yard setback for the building. So the board should again discuss sending comments to the Zoning Board of Appeals. We note that on other similar commercial lots that have been unable to meet yard setbacks due to relatively small lot sizes and double front and rear yard setback requirements. This has got 2 front yards, so there's double this front yard setbacks on two sides. The board has supported variances. The applicant has demonstrated that the project complies with total coverage. If the board finds the layout to be satisfactory, the applicant can proceed with the variance application. You should discuss that.
Is there anyone here for the applicant?
Andrew Strong from Landmarks. I'm here for the applicant. Welcome to the board. Mr. Parsons, your name precedes you in our office.
Good to meet you.
I've heard quite a lot about you. So we have the owners are here, Rich and his wife. And the things that I was hoping to accomplish tonight is, one, just get the general approval of the layout. It is a really small, awkwardly shaped lot. The building has been sort of designed in that stepped back fashion to specifically address the lot. The second is just to say we now have a lighting plan that we actually have here. You're welcome. We have 7 copies if you want to take a look at it, but I will obviously submit that to the planning department. But just in reviewing the memo, it struck me that there were a number of questions involving the landscaping plan. And so I wanted to give you a chance to ask them directly and have Richard Sperber here, who has 45 years of landscaping experience. Exactly. So I think the most efficient way to get you this information is if Rich, if you could come up, and I'll get out of the way.
Thank you.
Hey, Rich, how are you?
So basically, as Andrew said, we have the lighting plan. We'll submit that. The grading plan is already existing on the survey.
Would you want to address that question since you're up about the berms? Are you planning?
Yeah, the berms are going to be removed. Otherwise, everything's going to be held within the property. And we're not going any lower than existing grade, because I know you had a concern about the roots of the existing oak trees across Muir Boulevard. There's 11 out there. Yeah, there's about 11 oak trees out here right now.
Also, there are a lot of oaks along here, and there's, it's higher right now, so I don't know, I just want to make sure that if you're removing the berm here, that area is
I'm
not
not sure that those are actually on our property.
They're not on your property,
No,
but they're very,
right away.
they're right
Right.
up against your property, your
Right.
fence though, so.
Right. Yeah, no, obviously, I'm going to do anything we can to protect all the oak trees. There's one thing that I do want to bring attention to the board, which you might want to be concerned, is there's an outbreak from the DEC, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of Agriculture and Markets announced today that the oak tree disease, oak wilt, has been detected in the borough of Brooklyn, Kings County, and towns of Babylon, Islip, Riverhead, and Southold in Suffolk County. And also Central Islip. There's no known treatment to contain or control the oak wilt fungus other than remove the infected trees as well as surrounding host trees. The DEC is in the process of issuing emergency orders to establish protective zones encompassing the entirety of Suffolk County and the borough of Brooklyn. So we got to be careful with the oak trees. We may have a big problem with those. Well, there's plenty of them around, so. I don't know if you want. Oh, okay. All right, he'll submit those. Okay.
Just make the point that that's one of the reasons
Right.
we chose river birch. rather
Right. That's, one of the reasons I put birches on the property, because I wanted to have more of that natural kind of forest look. But I don't have a problem with replacing the river birch with white pines. And, if the board would prefer to have screening to the road. And the species of the height of the inkberry, it was glaber, which is a native plant. The 3 gallons are about 18 to 24 inches tall when they go in. And as far as the privet, I could sub that with hibiscus syricus, which is SYRIACUS. That's more the native variety for the other hibiscus that we had around the other property.
What was the thought of the post and rail fence? The concern is to protect that area there at the bottom of the drawing. And
This area in here?
right, and there was discussion of having a post and rail fence across the front of the parking.
Area. I would prefer, I'd like to ask for variance to be able to put stockade fencing here. I've got to protect the property there.
Well, let's go back,
Neighborhood-
though, but wait, one sec, let's take one thing at a time.
Okay.
The point is to keep everybody out of that area, that was the
Right,
purpose
well,
of
that was the
fence.
reason we put planting rather than the split rail fence.
Right,
So it's up to the board. I mean, if you want me to put split rail
Or
fence, then I
both.
could do that too, or both. I don't see the need to actually do both, but, that's one of the concerns we have. But I would like to be able to do stockade fencing around the property, because I've got to protect in the neighborhood that we're in. Unless I protect it, we'll have problems with vandalism
you know what you
and things
better
like
do
that.
is write all this down, put it in a letter to the planning department.
Okay.
We'll get you back on the agenda.
Okay,
Okay, does that make sense?
okay, yeah, and then we'll submit all this stuff.
We're gonna go around the whole.
Oh, okay.
If you guys just hold your thought.
Yeah,
Wait,
okay.
Do you mind just waiting for a sec? All right, let's go to Kathy,
Okay.
right? Yeah, I think this is you.
It is me.
Okay.
Excuse me. Well, I think Job's suggestion is a good one. You know, if you're willing to sub out the kinds of, we were concerned about the landscaping plan. It's different. The last time we were in, the berm was supposed to stay, so I'm surprised to know. that
I
it's
don't
gonna
think
go.
I don't think we ever discussed keeping the berm in, at least when I was at the hearing.
Yeah, well, it's, we've looked at it a
Because I don't
couple
even know what's in
times.
that berm, it's actually collapsing and stuff.
Right.
It was there when I started renting the property before I purchased it, so I have no idea what's, I'm assuming, my guess is that whatever trees that were cleared prior to when I rented the property,
Right.
between that period, I think it was 1994, you said, were put in the berm.
Right.
So it is collapsing in a lot of areas.
No, I understand. They're not perfect land masses.
Yes.
I get it. But the main issue is to try and keep some screening in. there.
Exactly. That's my main concern too, is to keep screening for the people coming down Muir Boulevard.
Right.
Because
yeah.
right next door is also, this is also a commercial site, and then you have one stop here.
Right. Isn't the one stop?
One stop is here.
Yeah, but it's down the hill.
Right, right.
Yeah, like you can't see it, so you have to.
Well, it's
Anyway,
pretty visible, yeah.
I've been there a couple of times.
Right.
So if when you go back to address these things, you can also include how you're going to access the stairwell in the back, and at least from the plan that I saw, you have a propane tank that's back there underneath one of those plantings, or nearish to one of those plantings in the northern piece of the property. Is that the north? Would we consider that the north? Yeah, thank you.
Talking about.
Yeah, there, because there seem to be some plantings that are going to go on top of that, and I'm not, and I think when we were here the last time, I remember talking to Rick about this, and we talked about a gate there and how this property was going to be distinguished from the neighboring property, because right now it seems like one whole thing, because you can't really get into it from Old Fireplace Road. There's no entrance to it now.
Right.
So even when I go there, I have to drive in, drive in on your other property to look at it.
Exactly.
So what's making it difficult? Pardon?
That's this piece in here, which is currently owned by Tintle.
Right. So, Tintle owns that? I thought that was abandoned.
That's the reason I had to go for all these variances. I did try
'Cause
to
it's
purchase this
Tintle's
property from him,
property.
but I don't know if it's ever going to happen, so. That's the reason we had to step the building and ended up. with the
So
building
what is all
setbacks.
that stuff that's on there? Is that his
Well,
stuff?
what happened is when the town had approved his commercial building back here, he had to transfer some property, and it's still actually undersized for what it is, and this was a piece that he had, so he merged this with this back piece,
Yeah.
just so that he was able to create this little bit of a parking area here. But nothing's ever gonna happen with this. This is gonna stay as is forever, unless he decides to sell it.
Good.
Then that actually changes the position of my building and everything else.
Okay, so, excuse me, but then the outdoor storage areas that are on the east side, west side, yeah. And we had, excuse me, I believe previously relaxed the setbacks for those 2 units. But I wondered, if you sell the property, our responsibility is to look in terms of the long-term and planning and
I hope I'm around for that.
well, me too. But I'm just, given that you're gonna go for 2 uses on this property, which is your right, under zone?
No.
You're not?
No, it's just gonna,
You're only having one use.
for right now, we're only gonna have one use. I do want to reserve the right for the second as the code allows, but it's not gonna happen while I'm there.
So the approval will allow for 2 uses.
Okay, so I'm grateful to you for saying it's gonna be 1 use while you own it, but when you sell it, if it becomes 2 uses, that's when my concerns begin to elevate, because I don't know who the new person might not be as nice as you are. So,
It's somebody I'm grooming to actually take over the business, so
Oh,
we'll
well,
continue to
so-
use it, so.
okay, maybe a blood relation.
Right.
But anyway, I think we need to just look at that in terms of what the long-term use is going to be, because, you know, that's our job as the planning board. And I would prefer to see a fence there on your southern side to demarcate the parking area.
Okay.
I'm a little worried that you may not have enough parking there for you have 4 offices, right? There are 3 office spaces, and then there's another one for your business. And somehow we calculated, I think 6 spaces were needed, or 7 spaces were needed for the office space. And then, you know, maybe I'm remembering old stuff, but I thought you were gonna have a home maintenance.
That's what we
There
actually
too.
do now. We're not just a landscape company. We manage
Right.
properties for a lot of our clients.
Right, but in terms of using this property toward that end, I'm just wondering, you know, people coming there, do you have enough parking? It's basically, that's the question I'm asking, do you have enough parking for that? Because there only seem to be 3 spaces in the northern part there on the eastern side, and then you have 9 down in the bottom. So if you have the landscaping business and the home maintenance business on the property, there's, you know, 2 uses, which is fine.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have, you know, employees coming, I know you have 2 big spaces there for big equipment, and I just don't wanna see the parking spill out onto Old Fireplace
Right, well,
Road.
that's the reason we have the garage bays, and we can actually drive through and come out on the backside, so that's going to enable.
So that's how you can
We have room
access.
for the vehicles inside,
Okay,
our trucks and stuff. And as far as somebody coming to the property, I think if I get 3 clients from the public coming a year, it's a lot. And I've been doing it for a lot of years.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
Nobody
okay.
really comes and visits us.
right, but you understand the line of question, you understand why I'm asking
So
that question.
there is enough parking, though, under the code?
Can I make, and just for what
That's a question.
I don't,
Does
I
it meet
can't
the
answer that.
parking
Does it meet the
requirement?
parking requirements?
Right now, the way we're calculating parking right now, we have not been calculating separately for offices on surface commercial uses. We've been taking 1 space per 500 square feet. In this instance, if you had, because it's the number of offices proposed, if we had done that, and it meets the 1 per 500, I don't remember exactly what
With
it is.
12 spots,
but
right?
if we had calculated the parking for approximately 1,200 square feet, it would come out to be 7 spaces. And I don't think that I'm not, plus all the equipment, so it's,
It's not clear, is what
yeah, it's not clear.
Could I just make one point addressing the parking? It's what we might be getting a little confused in that we originally submitted a plan that had, I believe, 7 parking spaces. We were then told, look, we really want you to think about the parking, put it down in a narrative as well. So we did the narrative that specifically addresses how the parking is going to be used on the site, and we expanded the parking to 12 spaces and then 2 truck trailer spaces here. So we increased the parking, and then we've slightly expanded the entrance as well to the north to allow for large equipment
Turning,
to be able
yeah.
to come in and access this area.
To turn into the garage, is
Yeah.
that the idea? Okay.
And from what I understood after presenting it at the last meeting, that those efforts were acceptable. And so I don't want to sort of get back on a...
Revisit that,
Yeah,
yeah.
let's move
Okay.
on, Kathy, to your other issues. And
Yeah, well,
Okay.
it's mainly the landscaping and the
Okay.
berm, because I thought the berm was gonna stay. And given the special groundwater protection issues, I think that that's something we need to address. And Rick, if you're willing to put in the white pines, I think that would be great. Not, I don't think the hibiscus is a great solution for your,
I wanted something that we could keep tight and keep a hedge that has density even when it loses its leaves, and also flowers.
Right.
It's nice. Well, I have a lot of
Right.
hibiscus hedges at houses, and they're, beautiful. and
Right.
they are.
But you feel that
Sharon,
it's,
is it the same thing?
Yes,
is it hardy enough? It's,
Rosa Sharon, yeah.
yeah, I have a couple of them in my yard too, so if that's what it is, I'm sure it'll be okay. We just
Well, we
consider
actually,
it to be a
I
different
think,
hibiscus.
yeah, I think my architect had put the wrong thing, where it's
Okay.
actually SYRIA.
Oh, well, it just
So
makes
it's the
makes a
variety
difference, that spelling, doesn't it? Especially in the Latin. Anyway, so that's acceptable then. Realistic height. Yeah, I think that's it for me.
All right. Diana?
Again, I'll be merciful, I like this, you did a good job. It's gonna be beautiful. And then you've done, you increased the parking, the building is situated, so you have the minimum, need for the zoning. I like the front part. If you need a stockade fence, is what you're looking to do along Muir to
Well, I think
protect
around the
you.
whole property, it'll also, give everybody privacy,
I don't have a problem with that. And
okay.
it's
Well,
gonna
go ahead.
stop the view, because, you're landscaping, along Muir, which would look pretty.
Right.
So the stockade fence, if you need it for security and for protecting your property, I'd prefer it wasn't a fence, but if you need it for protection, I understand that. I
The
would
only
not
option would be
oppose
like
it.
chain link, which,
Yeah, no, I understand.
Can you push it?
no, I'd want to put the stockade fencing, I would want to put the stockade fencing out here and plant in front of it, so that you don't see it.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see where you were pointing.
In
With the
other words,
stockade
the
fence.
outside border of
Oh.
the property
Out
on the
here,
street.
and then plant in front of it, pull it in about 4 or 5 feet, and then plant all along it so you don't see the fence.
I think you better get that in writing as a request to the
Okay.
planning department
Yeah.
and let them comment on it. It sounds
Sure.
a little unusual.
Because that's where those oaks are
Yeah.
too, right? I mean,
Well, I put the fence behind the oaks. See, the oaks, I believe, are in the town right-of-way.
I see.
Most of them, there was about 11, and when we submit the paperwork, I've actually marked on the survey, on the landscape plan, the approximate location of those oak trees.
Okay,
And
good.
there's one on the corner, you'll note that PSEG is recommending I take down. We had one fall on the wires a couple of weeks ago, and this other one is kind of leaning, and then the wires right now on the bottom is all damaged.
All right, I just want to try to move us along
Sure.
just because it's so
Okay.
late, and for everybody's benefit.
Well,
So
that's it, that's
you're
all I'm
okay.
saying. I like it, it's good, thank you for increasing the parking. I have no problem with the fence if you're gonna screen in front of it, so I'm good.
Okay, Ian?
Yeah, it's a pretty constrained property. I think that you moved the outdoor storage and parking based on our previous meetings, which I think works, and so I'm good with that. The only thing I will say is, if you are doing a stockade fence, I think it really does make sense to put that on the parking. Our concern is having the spillover from the parking into the landscaped areas, and that's why we
Right.
suggested a split rail fence.
Okay.
If you want to do stockade instead, there may be a good reason why, but I don't understand why you wouldn't put that stockade right in the parking line, so it constrains your area, and it still looks nice from the
Right,
outside.
what happens
It
by...
serves the same purpose.
Sure, but by pulling it all the way in here, leaving this all open, it's gonna become a dump. People are now dumping garbage all along Old Fireplace Road. I don't know if you've been down there, but you'll...
But even if there were 5 feet, it would still,
Well, no, it's a lot more than 5 feet from the property line back to here, but I would definitely put the split rail here if the board decides they want that, to keep this reserved area empty.
well, I'll
Under
keep an
planting.
open mind,
Right.
but in my mind, if the stockade fence is set back at all, it would allow for dumping. So if it's set back at all, you might as well have the one fence. It would look better from the road to have it on the parking line, and hopefully you don't have that problem. Again, I'm open-minded about that.
Right.
But it seems silly to have a split rail fence, landscaping,
another
and then
fence,
another
yeah.
fence. So you could serve the same purpose, I think, with the one stockade fence, and allow for a more beautiful public view, assuming they're not dumping trash, so.
Well, there would be nothing between here, beside the edge of the oak trees that are here, then there's nothing.
We're going to have to go into this.
raw. Okay,
I'll-
sure.
when you get
That's
back.
fine.
Just Trying to keep it.
Okay.
Yeah, Patty.
I'm worn down.
I know, we have one more to go, so let's finish this. Let's get this one finished.
I think the fence is also gonna be the ARB, right? I mean,
Well, we have to approve if it goes there.
oh, okay.
So
Okay, I'm fine with it.
you're fine for tonight?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
Randy.
It's a good place for it. Basically, good job. The only thing I don't like is that Tintel's not cooperating with you.
No.
Yeah, well, it's another story.
All right, so the only remaining, if you're okay, do we want to wait to discuss ZBA comments next time, which hopefully will be the last time when we've got all of this back from you? And don't let too much time go by, because if
No.
it's fresh in our minds, we can
Right.
do a better job for you.
Okay, well, he'll
Okay?
he'll submit
All right.
everything tomorrow.
All right, thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Peconic Land Trust.
Public
I
hearing
wanna-
is held on...
Eric,
Yeah.
let's slow down one sec. I want to make a comment about this, and this is partly also for you, John. Where we are with this is we've had our public hearing, and Eric has a memo on the public hearing. And what has come up, obviously, is there's a lot of question about the easements, and the town is the grantee on the easement, so it's also the town's responsibility to deal with this easement. Andrew was asked to speak tonight, and I know the neighbors are here, so what I'm going to ask the board to do, we'll have this discussion, but I'm going to ask that we don't make a decision on this easement tonight, because I think we're going to need to review these submissions, and it's a pretty big deal in terms of this application, where we all land on the easement. Does that sound okay with you, John?
That's fine. Are you opening the hearing now for neighbors
I'm
to
not
speak to,
suggesting-
or just getting
Well, this is
comments
the
back from
question.
council?
We've
From,
got the memo,
their
we've
counsel.
had the hearing.
right. Was it
Clearly,
closed?
there's a dialogue needs to happen about the easement.
Okay.
Would we rehear it?
Well, if what you want to do, you can, we basically have amended our policies to allow a continued discussion with the applicant over issues. If you're going to open it up to the public in general, then you're kind of opening the hearing again. I don't know if that's necessary.
Well, I think that would
the
be
issues are front-
premature.
Yeah, I think the
that
issues are,
We need to hear from the applicant. In this
Right.
case, you'll hear what the applicant says, and we'll put it back on the agenda. We haven't even had a chance, everyone will have time to review the submission.
Okay.
All right, get it back on the agenda, and if we decide at that point we need a new public hearing,
right.
we
Although I think that most of the issues that I think you're going to talk about have been raised by the public,
Right,
by neighbors, so I don't think there's any new information.
No, I'm really
I think you
talking
want to have
about
that discussion with,
the easement question.
Yeah,
And I
but-
just want to be sure that you'll get a chance to speak to the easement issue,
okay.
at least at the next meeting, if you don't like the decision, or you think it's going the wrong way, or whatever, okay?
Okay. Public hearing was held on December 7th. 2 neighbors spoke in opposition to the project, and 3 members of the Peconic Land Trust, as well as the applicant's attorney, spoke in support of the proposed project. Letters were submitted by 2 neighbors in opposition to the project, as it's currently proposed, and 2 members of the public wrote letters in support of the proposed project. A letter from a neighbor was submitted which outlines potential conflicts between the project, as it is currently proposed, and a number of previously established restrictions, including those imposed by the minor subdivision approval, the agricultural easement, the large lot easement, and the covenants and restrictions over the subject parcel. The board should defer to council to determine if any of these conditions or restrictions mentioned in the public comments would necessarily prohibit the approval of the proposed project. The board should discuss the public comments and determine if there are any other additional issues which need to be addressed at this time. The town engineer has okayed the engineering elements. The Office of Fire Prevention has said that a fire hydrant needs to be added on the corner of Side Hill Lane and Old Stone Highway. ARB approval would be a condition of approval if you can or do choose to grant it. So in conclusion, the board should discuss the public comments and determine if the application is ready for approval or not.
All right, John, would you talk to us about your
Sure.
your memo?
I reviewed the easements, which consisted of the large lot easement, the subdivision covenants and restrictions, and the agricultural easement. And I distributed a memo to the chair, and I think it's been circulated to the board members with copies of the documents. And essentially, I think, kind of boiling it down to probably the 2 critical comments, the subdivision covenants and restrictions speak to access to the premises, and the premises consisting of those 3 lots that were created. And there's a provision that states that access shall be over existing driveways in accordance with the map that was prepared by John Rayner in 1988, and that there be no new accesses submitted no new access is permitted for these 3 lots. So the accesses that are shown on the map, I interpret this to mean that the driveways you see on the map entering from a public street are the only entrances from the public streets that are supposed to be in existence for these 3 lots. What happens internally on the lots, I don't see a restriction on that. You can branch off from those driveways to go where you need to go on the property. But I read this as a restriction against adding any new entrances off the public roads into those properties. That was my interpretation of it. The other thing that I think was important is in the agricultural easement for Lot 2, there's a provision that basically says buildings and structures reasonably necessary for agricultural operations actually being conducted on the burdened premises may be erected thereon, provided they get site plan. So it's basically saying if you need a building for what you're doing on the premises, then you can have it. Has to be reasonably related to those uses that are going on in the property. And that, again, that's on Lot 2 in the agricultural easement portion of it. There are portions of Lot 2 that are not burdened by the agricultural easement that this wouldn't apply to. But that's my take on the documents. There were some other comments. I don't think that these are really a concern. I mean, there was limitations on removal of certain birch trees or native trees if they were over a certain diameter. Very large birch trees had to be over 8 inches and other trees over 12 inches. I don't think that's part of the proposal. I don't think they proposed to remove any of those trees. So I'm not sure that's a concern. So I think those are really the 2 issues that are pertinent right now. Did I miss anything, Eric?
Want to come up?
I would say if you wanted to prove that they complied with the tree removal provision, you could have them map on the site plan, because there are some trees in that area. I don't think that they meet that size requirement, but if you wanted just to demonstrate, to have them demonstrate that they're compliant with that, you could have them map that on the site plan. You have done that on subdivisions and site plans before. Have them show the diameter of the trees in the area.
Okay.
Or the diameter of the trees where the building is.
Well, that's what I mean. In the immediate area, it's going to be affected.
Okay.
Andrew?
I just want to respond to the 2 issues that John raised. I think are, those are the 2 that we highlighted as well. And just taking them in just the reverse order, the agricultural easement language, I think we generally agree with John's assessment. The language restricts, allows buildings that are reasonably necessary for agricultural operations actually being conducted on the burdened premises. This is a barn that is going to support agricultural operations actually conducted on the burdened premises. There's nothing in this language that restricts the agricultural operations to only the burdened premises, and that's an important distinction. This is standard agricultural easement language. It's in the sample form that's on the planning board website. It's paragraph 3B. So there's nothing out of the ordinary about this language, and interpreting it to mean that you could only do agricultural operations on the burning premises would have significant effects on farmers across the East End. It would mean that in order to use a tractor on another field that you're storing in a barn, you'd have to have the barn on the property, because the barn would be supporting the tractor that's doing agriculture operations on another field. So every field would need its own barn. That isn't a reasonable interpretation of the language. Is not interpreted that way on any other agricultural easement, and so we think that it should be interpreted consistently, and that the Mechanical Land Trust is showing that they're going to be actually doing agriculture operations consistent with a 10-acre plot of land on that site. With the access, I think, again, I think, the plain language of that, John has correct. I think we disagree with the takeaway. We're talking about I think the first point that we want to make is that access to the site is not part of our application. We're not applying for a road. We're not applying to change the access. The access that we're applying for a barn. And so, you know, it's not particularly relevant to our application. And, you know, the nexus between, you know, requiring a change in the access to the site and building a barn isn't clear in my mind, in the sense that we aren't increasing traffic on the site. You know, this is for equipment that already exists. And, you know, if there's an issue where the town or the planning board thinks that the current owners or tenants of that site are illegally accessing the property, there are other mechanisms to pursue, and they, you know, aren't particularly pleasant. But the mechanism is not to hold up an application for an unrelated project. That said, this is a farm field. Farmers take access to farm fields where it is safe and practical. Maybe not in that order, but this farm field has been accessed on Side Hill Lane or Deep Lane since 1962. You can see it on the 62, the 78, the 84, the 2001 aerial, and the access point perambulates. It moves because, you know, where a tractor goes once, goes twice, becomes a road. But it was there when this declaration was, the Declaration of Covenants and Restrictions was drafted, when this map was drafted. And it is not on the map, but it has been there since, continuously. So I think there's 2 points there. One, I think at this point, the applicant has an equitable argument, saying, look, for the last 15 years, we've been using this, and we've based our operations in part upon it. So what interest does the town have now in coming back and saying, well, this isn't appropriate? But two, on that, John, on the Rayner map, there is no access to the agricultural easement area at all. You can access the residence off the agricultural easement, but there's nowhere, there's no place to access directly onto the agricultural easement from Deep Hill or Side Hill Lane. So you'd have to come in off the residence and connect down to the easement. Forcing these farm vehicles, the alternative now would be to force all of the farm vehicles to cross Deep Lane to the barn, to travel on Old Stone Highway, down Old Stone Highway, down to Side Hill Lane, and over. Let's see if I can. So yeah, you come off here, come all the way down over to get to this field, right? Right now they're coming like this. We think that's a public safety concern. Old Stone Highway is a considerably busier street that is less visible, and you're going to have to travel it for a longer distance. So if the interpretation is that that's the only way forward, that this is the only access, we suggest that the declaration is a declaration of restrictions created by this board. This is not a scenic easement that needs the town board to amend. That this can be amended by the planning board. And so we simultaneously, without conceding that there is an access problem that's related to the barn, we'd say, look, if that's how you find this, we will make application to amend the 1988 planning board resolution that imposed the restrictions based on a map that doesn't make sense for the application of the farm or for the public safety of the street. And
that's certainly something they'd be entitled to do. I mean, he's right. It's not a scenic or conservation easement, so it is subject to an amendment if the applicant made a good argument for it.
This is the access question.
That's right.
But we would need to find either a change of circumstance or that there was an error in that condition. And in your interpretation, was there an access to the agricultural lot depicted?
Well, the agricultural, you can remember, it's not an agricultural lot. It's an easement on an existing lot that has an access, as far as the map is concerned. So, you know, there's, whether or not they can show that because of the, you know, passage of time, this was 1988, so it's a fair amount of time later, that there's a change that justifies, you know, a different solution. That's certainly something they could make an application for and try to show to this board.
It's a modification of
Be a modification of the terms of the covenants and restrictions.
And I think one of the underlying changes we'd point to is the dramatic increase in traffic on Old Stone Highway, where you know, it becomes a lot less practical to have the volume of farm equipment traveling down it than it did 30 years ago. So those are my comments.
So
If you have any questions for me.
Let's go around the board, and then I'd like to request to the board that we don't try to force a decision on this tonight. And we'll
That's
give
fine.
you a chance to review your material. If you guys want to submit something, we're happy to take that. Is that okay with the board? We won't try to decide this tonight.
Yeah, the only thing I mean, you're showing and defer to John, but it's in how involved the public is and to what point it becomes a matter of reopening the hearing. I'm a little uncomfortable having just certain members of the public comments.
Oh, yeah, if you're going to have public comments submitted in addition to what you have already, then you're going to have to reopen.
We are. I'm not opposed to that. I mean,
Okay. Well, I mean,
I think we
let's see
just,
if
this is a
issue- I
question
think
that
you need to
really,
look at this and see if you want to make
I mean,
that.
this is an issue that really should have been settled before we got to hearing,
Right,
actually.
right.
And it just, there was no interaction between the trust and the town on this, you know.
I mean, we were first made aware of this issue on, you know,
Well,
Wednesday morning.
we thank the Schwegels made us aware of it, but,
Yeah.
so if we have to rehear it, we'll do that.
Okay.
Let's go around the board and just to finish this for tonight.
Well, my question, John, regarding the ag easement where it says on premises, do you agree with Andrew's interpretation of that?
Well,
In that it's just,
I don't think that there's a prohibition to saying that, you know, what you have on this property can only be used on this property, but one thing I think you have to keep in mind with that language that's in the,
ag easement, yeah.
was, let me just find it, was the reference to what's reasonably necessary for operations on the premises. So, I mean, I could see that becoming a factor in, you know, I have 3 acres and I've got 100 tractors. Maybe that's because 98 of them go elsewhere. That might not be reasonably necessary for what occurs on that property.
But when it says burden premises, do you think it's just referring to that lot?
Yes, to that agricultural easement area only, right? That's just the ag easement on Lot 2.
Right.
So it would only be to that agricultural area. It would only be this part here.
But if I'm
It's one lot.
understanding, Andrew's making the case that it could be used for the other property as well.
Mhm.
So that's what
Yeah,
I'm unclear about.
No, you know, I think it's going to be a judgment as to what you deem to be, what do you consider the language, and it's in here, what do you consider reasonably necessary for agricultural operations actually being conducted on the burdened premises? What does that mean? I mean,
So what, I mean, is a 3,800 square foot barn on a
right,
10-acre
is that-
property
is that
reasonably necessary to
unreasonable,
agricultural
or is it
activities?
reasonable? I don't
You
know.
know,
Andrew, could I ask you to step back now?
Oh, sure.
And otherwise, we're not going to get out of here. I don't want to.
Questions.
I don't know the
Well,
answer to that, but I think
Excuse me. All right.
it's a good thing for you to address.
I got to get a handle on this.
Okay.
We don't know.
We're not going to continue the debate tonight.
Right.
All right, so we're just going to hear from the board, and then we're going to reschedule this, okay?
I still need to try to figure that out.
That's fine, if you want to ask
Okay.
questions, but what I see coming is like a debate. I don't want to have a debate on this.
Sorry, that's fine, but I feel
like
I did mention.
Yeah, I think you just need to identify, I think that's an important issue for them to address for the board, so that,
Okay.
you know, they explain why they feel that this is a reasonable
It
application.
still doesn't deal with the question of, and we'll get back to Patty, of the tractors going to other fields. That's the crux question, I think. It's been stated by the trust that the purpose of the project is to, you know, be the home base, and then the tractors go out and work on the other fields, which is a normal farming practice, but is it allowed by the easement, right? That's the question.
And perhaps if there are other scenarios where that is the case, then maybe I would be interested in seeing that, if there was some sort of
Be
precedent.
helpful. Right.
Okay. Randy?
Is it, it is a 3,800 square foot building? Well, I think I find Andrew's 20.
2,800 square feet?
Okay. I think I find Andrew's arguments persuasive, tempered by John. In other words, the idea that a farm storage building, that tractors stored in a farm storage building on a particular lot could never cross the street. I mean, the land trust operation right in that area includes properties across the street. So I think an interpretation that it can only be, like, that it's like a lawnmower that you're only going to use on your lot.
Yeah, I don't think it really says, I don't think it really says that. I mean, my thought is that it only says that when it gets to the point where
yes,
the burden on this premises is excessive for what's on this property.
I agree.
That's where I think you cross the line, and I don't know where that line is. I mean, if we're talking 2,800 square feet, I don't know if that's a big barn or not, really. Or an overly large lot, I don't know. That's something for them to tell us, I think.
I would support a modification if it's necessary, but we did see that the language in the scenic easement suggests that farm vehicles can cross the easement, so the ag easement, in a sense, is inconsistent. So
Right.
I think there's room for interpretation here. At the same time, I haven't heard the objections. I'm a new member, and I haven't heard the objections from the neighbors. I don't know if it's visual, or I don't know what the objections are. But in general, I'm comfortable with the building of the barn, the use of the barn as the applicant's attorney has described, a modification if it's necessary. Peconic Land Trust, I don't, I mean, maybe if they would agree that they're not gonna store tractors here that they use outside the town of East Hampton. Yeah.
I'm sure they would agree with that.
Okay. Ian?
I'm comfortable with the application. I think during public comments, the reason we have public hearings is to bring new things to light, and I think that the neighbors certainly did. With respect to, this is not a large barn. 2,000 square feet is not a big barn, and I'm familiar with this farm operation, I'm familiar with the farmers, and I'm 100% confident that everything that's kept in that barn will reasonably be necessary to be used on that site. I think we have to be really careful when we start saying anything that's in that barn could never go someplace else, because it's just not good planning. Now, if they were proposing a 20,000 square foot barn, which might not even be possible on this site, and there were no fields under cultivation, I think we're looking at a very different thing, because very clearly that's designed as a storage facility to be used someplace else. I'm very familiar with this operation, and I'm confident that that's not the case, that what will be in that barn would be used on site, and I think, as the neighbors pointed out, it will likely be used elsewhere. Council is guiding us that that's okay if it's reasonably necessary, and I'm close to 100% confident that you meet that criteria. I think the access issue is a little bit tougher. I think the applicants brought up a really good point, that it doesn't seem to make much sense, which is why I think we have to be really careful with putting covenants and restrictions in place that might not make sense in a practical matter in the future, because I think the access that is currently used and has been shown for a long time does make sense, but at the same time, I want to make sure that we're not approving anything that isn't legal, and I think our council has cautioned us on that one. So from a practical standpoint, I'm comfortable with the access. If it turns out that we prohibit that as part of this site plan, and you have to go the other way, you decide to do a modification, I'm okay with that too. So long story short, I'm totally good with the barn, the access. I want to find a way to make it work in a way that's safe for everybody.
I don't really have
much more to contribute to what was already said. I think it's a little bit of a conundrum, but I think the arguments are compelling. And I think these easements are complicated and not that clear. So I think we have to err on, side of just to be a coach, you err on the side of the player. So I would err on the side of the applicant here.
Short and merciful, I agree with Ian.
All right, so I'd like to look at all of this material before I, further. I've read these easements multiple times at this point. So let's just be clear that the game plan will be, we'll come back on the agenda. We will have reviewed what you've submitted. If you guys want to submit, please do. We'll review that. And then next week, I think we'll have a consensus on what direction we're going, and we'll schedule another public hearing. Okay. And if we agree at that point that the path that we're going to take is to amend the covenants and restrictions, we'll talk about that process too, and you would have to get an application in. Right. Planners, are you okay with this game plan?
We're going to reopen the public hearing then?
Well, I don't know if we reopen or we have to reschedule from.
We'd have to.
Remail.
What new information are we hoping to gather?
Because he may, I mean, you're going to look at it further, but the change in the application may be to modify these CNRs. So that would be something that would need a new hearing anyway. So we'd open it, schedule a hearing.
That's a new application.
New application and just have another hearing.
My point is that they brought up very good points that are well articulated. They spoke in public about it, and they submitted a letter. I think we have the information.
Right.
You do, that's on, yeah.
So I'm wondering what else we want.
You would need a new hearing, though, if they are going to look to amend the covenants and restrictions, though, because that's a new application.
New application, absolutely. I'm saying, on this application, I don't know what.
Well, I don't know.
But how does that serve this application if it's going to be a new application? I mean, I think the point, as a exercise in logic, the application was for a barn. It wasn't, the access was brought up, as a corollary to that barn, but it's not what this application is about.
What it's saying, it's different, that has to have its own application.
I
So,
get that.
So but the question is.
But where does that leave this
The applicant has
application?
submitted more material, we've had this discussion. So, John, can we have a discussion next week and make a decision on this easement without having another hearing? That's my question.
That's.
Oh,
On
of
this.
course, yes.
We in solid ground not to have another hearing on this application.
Yes. I think you are. I mean, the documents are what they are. We're going to interpret them.
They've not been changed.
They've not been
Nothing's
changed.
Okay, all right,
We've
so.
heard
We'll only
the
need a new
public.
application and a new hearing if
So
there's
we just have
desire
to
to
make a
change that.
decision.
So we will do that.
With our
But
opinion
Good.
from the attorney.
At the same time, I don't think, conversations and an ongoing discussion with the applicants is fine. I don't think we should take new information or new materials from any other parties unless you're going to have a new hearing and let
Right.
the whole public
Yes, that
comments.
makes sense.
So that's what I'm saying. I think I think the information that's been submitted is probably as thorough as it needs to
Pretty
be from the
complete.
neighbors.
Adequate.
They've raised the issue, we're aware of it, and that's what we're looking at, so. And that was done prior to the hearing closing.
Right.
Normally, if you get an application for a barn on an easement or a reserved area, do you include the access to the barn as part of the approval? So where is the access to this barn in this application?
I didn't want to.
He looked at you.
That's why we looked at these documents to say, I think the proposal was that the access is off of Deep Lane, and that doesn't seem doable under the,
Well, I mean, if we toggle back to the site plan that was submitted, it shows two access. Well, it shows.
oh, there are two?
From Old Stone all the way to Deep Lane.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the PDF file.
Is that it right there?
Yeah, it should be.
Is that it?
Should only be two.
No. Yeah, it looks
Yeah,
like
that's
it.
it.
Yeah. Okay, so here it is. So it comes here and it winds around?
Yeah.
And eventually ends up here? Right. And this is the one that's mapped and this is the one that's not? Okay.
So in the application, there shows an access from Deep Lane.
Yes.
Which as of now is not, unless we amend the covenants and restrictions, that cannot happen.
Well, that's
Under
not
the
our
present,
But that.
that's our,
That's my thought.
Right.
Wants to,
it's not on the,
It's not on the Rayner map.
no, but it's on the application.
It is on the application because it exists. I mean, it's there, so
Right.
the surveyor mapped it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
right,
He does anyway.
right.
Or should. Should.
But, it's, I'm
All
not
right,
sure.
so let's, we're
Okay.
going to revisit this at the next meeting, and we'll make a decision.
Okay.
Okay, is everybody all right with
Would
that?
you be willing to submit a modification application?
Yes, we would. Yep. If we went that route, it would be in the Pecana Land Trust's interest to then separate the applications and go forward with a barn application and have
Right.
the access.
Exactly.
a decision on the site plan.
Right.
Right.
They're on the clock.
Right.
I think if you allowed the planning board extra time and in the interim submitted a request to modify the subdivision, would that be?
Yeah, we could do it that way too, absolutely. And that probably makes almost more sense since we haven't rendered a decision yet.
Modify the ag easement, and the board can't make a decision on this site plan until that's done,
Right.
then maybe that's.
You mean
what
the
we should
covenants
do.
and
Chicken and egg.
restrictions?
Well, I don't, and
The
it's,
Aggies, the covenants restrictions.
Is it? I thought both.
I think it was a subdivision CNRs, I think.
This is subdivision CNR.
Yeah, subdivision CNRs,
You can't modify that's exactly right. You can't modify the easement.
right,
Those are easier to
yeah, subdivision CNRs.
Did you?
I think that's probably a choice on your end, whether you want to change it, revise the application, or do a separate one.
If the board feels they can't approve this unless there's a modification of the covenants and restrictions, then it behooves the applicant to give you an extension of time on the site plan and submit an application to modify the subdivision and covenants and restrictions. It's the way I see it. I don't know if you agree, John.
I agree they can do that. I think they could also probably do it separately if they wanted to, but we couldn't affirmatively approve that existing.
Right, that would have to be a condition of the approval,
Yeah,
that
wouldn't be.
access disappeared until
Right.
we
Yeah, you can
chose
say you're
or
taking
not.
access off of Old Stone
Right.
for
Right.
now, and then you're trying.
Until we chose or not to request a modification.
I think
But,
that's
yeah.
if you submitted, is this okay after the hearing, a revised map that doesn't show the access that's in question, but shows the barn coming in off Old Stone,
Mhm.
then there would be less concern for a vote in
Right.
favor of the existing site plan.
I mean, I'd have to talk to the Peconic Land Trust about what they're
I'm
comfortable
not
with.
sure
but-
that's completely
right.
above board.
I'm not, I think somehow you have to address it on I mean, it's definitely there, so you
Yeah.
can't pretend it's not there on the map, but maybe, acknowledge somehow that, or we would just say that that's not an access that we see as permissible to use if that's where we come out, unless they make an application to
It sounds
modify.
better to just do the modification application right away.
Could do that and then rehear it.
I think the only advantage to trying to get the approval for the barn is that, I think they want it for the farming season, which is fast approaching. So, I mean, it sounds like that's the direction that we're going to go. I obviously need to talk to our client about it, but we will hustle with that application. But to the extent that they could be, it could be a condition of approval, that is not an access point until, or unless and until or something, that would be that would be the way we'd prefer to go. Now, you can tell us whether or not that's, you get to tell us the way.
You've got a ways to go. It's not, you're looking at having your barn up in the fall or something like that.
What?
Oh, don't say that.
Realistically? All right, I'll take it back. We'll see what happens.
It doesn't seem necessary, though, because if the issue is they're not allowed that access, it's not like
All
they're
right,
going to say, we're
we'll
not
see.
going to build a barn.
Right.
I wouldn't think.
No, that's exactly right.
All right, look, I don't, you just,
Okay,
you
okay.
tell me in September if I was wrong. We're going to help you make this happen as quickly as we can, okay? Resolutions.
Whistle Lane?
Whistle, we want to do Whistle Lane? Do you have it there?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Whistle Lane.
In the matter of the application of Whistle Lane subwaiver for modification, I have read the resolution and move for its adoption.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. Beachcomber or below the bridge, whoever's got it. Beachcomber?
Beachcomber. In the matter of
Beachcomber.
the application, Beachcomber dumpster enclosure site plan, for an extension of time to a period of 1 year, to obtain a certificate of occupancy or until May 15th, 2017. I've read the resolution and move for its adoption.
Second? Somebody second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
In the matter below the bridge, lot line modification for an extension of time for a period of 1 year or until April 28th, 2017. I read the resolution and move for its adoption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. Minutes.
I've read the minutes and I move for the
I had a
adoption.
couple corrections, believe it or not. I'm taking Bob Schaefer's role.
Go ahead.
Jody, it's 55 Town Line Road, number 3,
Oh, no, 55.
not 33. You want to just give this to Jody? And then there's a word alternative in the bottom paragraph that's not spelled
Alternative.
correctly.
Okay.
All
I
right.
move that with the corrections, they be adopted.
A motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion
I
to,
should abstain.
yes, you have to
You weren't
abstain.
here,
Mr.
yes.
Parsons abstains. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're going
Thank you,
to,
thank you, everybody, for getting
No.
through it.
then we're going to do a brief exec.
What's that?
We're doing a brief exec.
Oh, I forgot, geez, we have a very brief executive session downstairs, and we will, we'll adjourn from the executive session.
Please, when I go back and review the tapes on LTV, everybody's
Hardly
mumbling.
hear
Hard
them.
to hear.